Hey everyone, welcome back to Engelbard Gaming. I've got the latest episode of my Shining Force Retrospective for you today, and with it, we move into the
third dimension.
Today I'll be covering Shining Force 3, Scenario 1 for the Sega Saturn. If you're new to this series, I've already covered Shining Force 2, the 3 Shining Force Gaiden titles on the Game Gear, and Shining Force CD on Sega CD. And you can find links in the description for each of those episodes if you want to catch up first. For this retrospective, I'll be covering the history of the game, some interesting information on it, then I'm going to go and spoil the entire thing by covering every battle and exploration scene and the complicated story. Some of you weren't happy that I skipped some optional characters and things like that in Shining Force 1 and 2, so I did mostly everything in this one. Oh, and I'll be doing a video for each scenario in Shining Force 3 since each game is pretty long. After Shining Force Gaiden, the final conflict, and Shining Force CD, the Shining Force series took a bit of a hiatus. Sonic Software Planning continued to get more intertwined with Camelot Software Planning, as I mentioned in the past. Camelot had released Beyond the Beyond for the PlayStation, Sonic Software Planning had collaborated with Camelot Software Planning on Shining Wisdom for the Saturn, and then followed that up with Shining the Holy Ark for the Saturn. Shining the Holy Ark actually has some big story ties to Shining Force 3, the game we're talking about today, so I will mention those when appropriate. If you're not familiar with Shining the Holy Ark, it is a 3D grid-based dungeon exploration game, and sort of a spiritual follow-up to Shining in the Darkness. Shining Force 3 was a huge game released in 3 different parts in Japan called Scenarios. Scenario 1 was released in December of 1997 in Japan, Scenario 2 followed a few months later there in April of 1998, and Scenario 3 came along in September of 1998. Of these 3 games, only Scenario 1 was released in the US, and it was simply titled Shining Force 3. It came out on July 31st, 1998 here. Now, some gaming magazines speculated that Sega would release the final 2 scenarios, but to those gaming magazines from back in the day that thought that, I give you a nice retroactive, well, you're wrong! It was a crying shame that we never got the other scenarios in English, and that it stayed that way for a very long time. Sega has still never released official English versions of Shining Force 3 Scenarios 2 or 3. However, the absolute heroes at the Shining Force Translation Project, link in the description, translated Scenarios 2 and 3, as well as the premium disc, which contains some extras we'll talk about in a later episode. Not only did they translate the games years ago, they've been updating the translations literally ever since. The newest version of the translation is less than a month old as I record this. Why am I mentioning this stuff about Scenarios 2 and 3 if I'm covering Scenario 1 today? Because the Shining Force Translation Project released an updated translation of Scenario 1 to keep it consistent with Scenarios 2 and 3. I'll be playing their translator versions of the 3 games for this video series. Again, big thanks to the team for undertaking and completing such a gargantuan project. Regarding the game itself, Shining Force 3 is the first polygonal game in the series. For the battles and exploration sections of the game, the backgrounds are polygonal and can be rotated left and right with the shoulder buttons on the Saturn pad. You can also center your view and zoom in and out. The characters themselves are 2D sprites during these scenes. For the battle scenes, the close-ups feature fully polygonal characters, some polygonal background elements, and then 2D backgrounds. The game looks nice for the time it came out, even if it wasn't exactly the pinnacle of the genre at the time. When it comes to difficulty, ooh boy, get ready for some tough fights and tough optional bits during fights in this game. You might find yourself retreating from battles after messing something up and doing it over and over. There are quite a few instances where you need to save characters from getting killed, and you barely got just enough time to get to them. In a lot of these cases, you never have to save them to go on with the game, but come on, what kind of hero would you be if you let them die? Shining Force 3 ups the complexity of the series with smaller treasure areas within some battle maps, multiple different teams engaged in battle at the same time, and several things that affect elements in Scenarios 2 and 3 that are permanently missable in Scenario 1. The game also includes the new friendship system. There are 4 levels of friendship between characters. Characters gain friendship points when they attack the same foe or one heals another. You'll see icons above the characters' heads to indicate what type of bonus the friendship grants, like a sword to show a higher attack or a shield for higher defense and things like that. When a character occupies a square next to a friend, that's when they activate their friendship bonuses. If a character dies in battle, their friendship level with anyone they're friends with decreases. And yes, that is just as annoying as it sounds. The higher the friendship level, the greater the stat boost. Now, Shining Force 3 has never been released on modern platforms, at least not at the point that I'm recording this, so if you want to play it, you've either got to play the game on real Saturn hardware or emulation. There's a few bonuses to emulation, I think, especially like being able to map the L and R buttons to the right analog stick on a modern controller, or a much more contemporary control scheme. If you're going to play the game using a current emulator like Beetle Saturn and RetroArch, then you'll want to make sure, in that case, that you go into the emulator's menu after you launch a game, and then change the save type in the options so that you're using shared saves instead of individual per game ones. Why do you need to do this? So you can save your information and then transfer it over to scenarios 2 and 3 should you choose to go on with it. And if you complete scenario 1, you're probably going to want to play scenarios 2 and 3. Now normally this is where I talk about interviews, what the developers had to say, and stuff like that. But like with some of the other games in the series, I couldn't really find much of that stuff for Shining Force 3. So here's a look at the US box, the disc, and instructions. I bought this from Toys R Us way back in 1998, the week that the game came out. In this gently used condition, this game would go for about $300 these days, according to PriceCharting.com and eBay. If you can manage to find one brand new in box, well that's about $730 right now. This was one of the last major releases for the Saturn in the US back in the day. Okay, so next up, let's cover the story and sort of a little mini strategy guide here. I cover the entire game from start to finish, summarized as succinctly as possible, but it's still going to be a long video. I'll also have a review of the game at the end that follows immediately after. Now because I'm covering the entire story, if you haven't yet played Shining Force 3 Scenario 1 and you want to do that and be surprised, stop the video right now. Don't watch any more from this point on. It won't bother me. I don't want to ruin it for you. Now if you already know the game or don't care about its entire story being spoiled, then watch on, friends. Just be aware that you've been warned that I'm going to ruin everything about the plot. Let's get on with it. The game begins with a CG animated intro. It mostly shows events that will happen towards the end of this scenario. Now, Camelot's CGI work in Shining Force 3 is much better than in their previous games, and they don't rely on it as much in this game. This game actually uses hand-drawn portrait art for the characters. Anywho, this is Shining Force 3 Scenario 1, the Titan of Aspia. And here's our cute little intro this time around and the characters that actually put us into the story. An old wizard and a little fairy. You'll see them when you load or quit a game. At the start of the game, you get to name the 3 main characters. By default, we have Symbios, who is the hero of Scenario 1, Median, who is the protagonist of Scenario 2, and Julian, who is the main hero of Scenario 3. We meet all 3 of them pretty early on in this game, but we'll be controlling Symbios and his force throughout this adventure. The game opens with a flyover of the town of Saraband, a city on an artificial continent powered by steam, run by a governor named Garvin. It starts with a peace conference called to reduce the hostilities between 2 nations on the verge of war, the Aspinian Republic and the Destonian Empire. Here we meet a few major characters: Symbios our hero, Dantares a centaur knight, Mascarin the mage, and Grace the priest. Now Symbios is here because his father, Lord Conrad of Flagard, is sick. We also see a few other bigwigs from Aspinia that figure into the story, like General Edmund, General Tybalt, and the good King Benetrim. The story here is that Tybalt of the Republic had a rebellion on his hands. Instead of putting it down himself or asking another member of the Republic for aid, he went to the Empire and let them into Aspinian territory, which kicked off the entire conflict when they took control of Barrand, which was land belonging to the Republic. Yes, folks, the story here is already a lot more complex than the prior games. Anywho, the group agrees that the Empire would eventually have invaded anyway, since the Holy Land of Elbasem was just too enticing a target for them to ignore. We won't see the Land of Elbasem in this game, by the way, but we will see it in the next one. Now, a messenger arrives at the end of the meeting. Apparently, the Emperor wants to meet in private with King Benetrim to discuss terms without the interference of other voices on both sides. King Benetrim agrees to the meeting and tells Symbios and company to explore the town and get to know the people. That's right, town exploration is back, baby! You're free to wander through a large section of Saraband, but not all of it. Make sure in this game to check every cupboard, cabinet, pot, and box that you see. This game has plenty of hidden items. Eventually, you'll wander into the section of town where the Empire's troops are hanging out, and they'll threaten you and try to start a fight. The conflict is resolved before it truly begins by Prince Median and his party. The 2 parties chat when Saraband is rocked by explosions. Get ready for battle number 1. Once you wander out of the scene, you'll discover that some masked monks are behind the explosions, and they attack Symbios and his party. Combat in Shining Force 3 is very much like the prior games in the series, although the environments are fully 3D this time around, as are the battle close-ups. While the music isn't Red Book audio in this game like it was in Shining Force CD, the music truly is fantastic and really catchy. I often found myself humming along with it. Now, one side effect of the move to 3D environments is it can be a little tougher to judge exactly where your characters are. There's a little bit of a cursor on the ground, so you want to take things slow and be deliberate to make sure you're parking your character in the right place and that you don't take actions you don't want to by accident, such as making them hold because you're one space further away from an enemy than you thought you were. Now, there's not much to the strategy for this first battle. Just don't let anyone get surrounded, especially Symbios, because if he falls, you lose the battle. Symbios does have the Egress spell, just as the other Shining heroes do in prior games, So you can use that spell to flee from battle anytime that Symbios's turn comes up and he has enough magic points. And right now, it's the only spell he's got, so you'll always have enough magic points to use it. Now as for the battle close-ups in Shining Force 3, sure, they look a smidge rough in 2024 as I record this, but they looked alright back in 1998. They're not on par with the best graphics of the system or anything, but they're fine, and there's a lot of really cool and fancy effects later on in the game. But when it comes to sound in these close-up battle scenes, it's really good. It adds some real heft to the game. Some of these attacks are just fierce, and it really gives it some oomph that's missing from other strategy RPGs of the era. Anyway, we finish off all those masked monks and move on. After the battle, Symbios and company decide to head back to the building where King Benetrim is staying, but they run into King Benetrim on the road, and he's accompanied by masked monks and seems to be kidnapping Emperor Domaric from the Destonian Empire. Dantares speaks out to Benetrim and tells him that he shouldn't be doing this, but Benetrim mocks him and tells Dantares that he dares him to strike him down. Dantares does nothing while the king leaves with the monks and Emperor Domaric. Symbios and company go back into the building and see King Benetrim sitting in his seat, accompanied by Tybalt and Edmund. Wait a minute, something's going on here, isn't it? Turns out someone was impersonating Benetrim, but the real Benetrim is now in danger because of this ruse. He's accused of being behind the attack on the town and the kidnapping of the Emperor. Benetrim wisely decides that they need to get the heck out of Dodge and go someplace they can figure all of this out. They decide to head toward the town of Balsamo. Now Generals Edmund and Tybalt valiantly offer to stay behind and act as decoys to attract and then hold off the enemy forces with their own armies while King Benetrim escapes. Benetrim says he doesn't plan to run, but instead to prove his own innocence to clear the Republic of any wrongdoing, since trade with Saraband is vital to the health of the Republic of Aspinia. At this point, we're free to explore the town and head to the item shop if we need to. Before we leave, we might want to take a look at the egg in the building that just bounces around for right now. We'll see this egg again later. I'll also note that the churches in this game function like they do in every other Shining Force title. You can cure poison and curses, revive dead characters, promote eligible characters, and save your game at any of them. I'll refer to this as just party maintenance from now on. Anyway, head toward the docks to kick off the cutscene that begins battle number 2. So upon reaching the docks, the party sees a bunch of slaughtered knights. There are also a couple of archers here. There's Hayward, wonder if his last name is Jablomi, and Garrosh. One of the masked monk mages floats in the sky and murders a couple of more Saraband soldiers who try to stop them from leaving with Domaric. Shortly after that, the battle begins. For this battle, you'll want to make sure you talk to both Hayward and Garrosh. Hayward joins you immediately in the battle. Garrosh, on the other hand, will join Median's party in Scenario 2 as long as you talk to him here and right now. That's right, folks, get ready for some shenanigans where you can miss stuff in one game that causes you to miss stuff in the other 2 games. Now, battle number 2 is pretty straightforward, so we'll go through this one quickly. First up, I stress again, head for those archers and talk to them as fast as you can. If you fail to talk to them before they die, you'll lose them permanently. Now, Garrosh, who witnesses both the real Benetrim as well as his evil doppelganger, promises to report on what he saw and clear Benetrim's good name. Getting back to the battle itself, be warned that the bats can poison your characters and you'll want to focus on them first. It's a little tougher to gain experience early on in this game than it is in prior Shining Force games. Now, as usual, I suggest spreading out the attacks and the experience and letting your magic users take the easy kills when possible. As you get towards the north end of the bridge, make sure you don't place characters next to each other. You don't want to get hit by area of effect spells from the mage here. Do also note that you can attack barrels during combat in Shining Force 3, and they'll often have items in them, and sometimes they'll grant you access to other parts of the map after the battle is over. If you don't destroy the barrels during combat, well, guess what? Those areas of the game are locked off to you forever. After the battle, Dantares observes that it seems Garrosh is taking a little too long to report back on Benetrim's innocence. The team decides that it's too dangerous to just keep waiting here, so off to Balsamo it is. We get one more chance to explore the town and shop before we depart. As soon as our business here is concluded, we go back to the same place where we just fought the battle on the docks, and we go to the end of the bridge and go through the gate to begin battle number 3. As soon as we leave town, Benetrim tells everyone that their ultimate destination for now is Railhead because he ordered General Proton to await him there in case there were any shenanigans. The fake Benetrim shows up to taunt the force with one of the masked monks carrying the unconscious Emperor Domaric on his shoulder. The baddies summon a whole bunch of enemies and head towards the town on the far side of the map. Now, Battle 3 is our first traditional Shining Force outdoor-style battle. We've got plains, woods, hills, mountains, and water. I should probably mention there are 2 distinct battle menus. There's one when you're on a character and one when you're on a blank space. If you open the battle menu when you're on a blank space, if you want to open a mini-map, for example, as in the prior games, you have to do that from the menu that you get when you're on a blank space. Alright, anyway, for this fight, things are kept pretty simple at the beginning. It's not possible to catch up to the Imposter and the Emperor, unfortunately, so don't stress over that. Now, after we make some progress along this map, the Saraband forces emerge from town, sandwiching us between 2 hostile forces. The Saraband force has a lot of centaurs in it, so you want to slow them down, and you can do that by traveling through the woods. Now, this battle will take some doing, but it's typical Shining Force. If you've played the other games in the series up to this point, nothing here will surprise you. Once we polish off all the enemies here and the battle concludes, General Varlant of the Republic arrives, impressed with Symbios' combat prowess. He says General Tybalt ordered him to come here and assist Benetrim. Just as Varlant notes he wasn't needed, some ships arrive containing another force. It's at this moment that General Spiriel of the Destonian Empire emerges from Saraband to greet them. She had been protecting Prince Magaron from the Empire. There are 3 princes of the Empire, by the way. There is Magaron, Arant, and Median. Imperial General Cruert and Prince Arant and Magaron also emerge from Saraband. After some minor quibbling among the Imperials, Spiriel engages Varlant's force, and we hightail it to Balsamo to try and find Emperor Domaric. When Symbios and company arrive in Balsamo, they find the masked monks are, in theory, praying for peace. Isn't that nice? Here we learn about Bolzone, the deity that the masked monks worship. Make sure to thoroughly explore the town and collect all the collectibles. We'll also find our first ruins map here, and ruins maps are especially important since you need them to explore ruins in certain battles. Now, I recommend hitting up a guide to see what items you can find in all of them so you don't miss anything. After we're done exploring, we head to the inn to check things out. In the middle room on the 2nd floor, we meet 4 pretty strange characters. This quartet consists of Fiale, Desharon, Basanda, and Goriate. They tell us they're the high priests of the Bolzone sect. The Bolzone sect, by the way, is dedicated to the revival of the Vandal named Bolzone. We'll talk about Vandals just a little bit later. Now, in this room, there's also a masked monk who appears to be tied to a chair in the back of the room. Gee, I wonder who that could be. Anyway, we'll see Fiale and Basanda throughout the game, so get used to them. When Dontaris tries to examine the prisoner in the room, the Sharon immediately blocks it. The Force blames the Bolzone sect for purposely derailing the peace conference. Shortly after, the prisoner wriggles his mask off, and sure enough, it's Emperor Domaric. How is he wearing that crown under that mask? The world may never know. After that, the priests launch everyone out of the room, and all the Bolzone monks vanish from the inn, along with Emperor Domaric. We won't actually see that everyone's gone from the inn until we leave and come back, but if we do and then go back into this room, here we also learn that it was Bolzone and Fiale specifically that were responsible for kidnapping Domaric. Yes, Fiale was the imposter. When we go back to the 2nd floor of the inn, there's something we can do here. We're going to walk along the end of the long hallway and then off the map. We'll navigate around a bit and find a secret character here, Bernard the Archer. But don't get too excited. Untie him. He's a little surly with us and he walks off. He'll join Median's force in Scenario 2. And if you don't free him now, you won't see him in Scenario 2, so this is a permanently missable character. Once we take care of that bit of maintenance, we go to Obright the Dwarf, who joins the force now. He's on top of the building here and was part of General Prodon's group. His buddy Toby knows of a secret passage to Dwarf Hill which will help get us to Railhead. We head to Toby's house, which is the one next to the well. And as long as Obright is with us, we'll get access to the secret passage which will lead us into the next battle. Please note that if you come here without Obright, you will not be able to proceed. Here's battle number 4, Dwarf Valley. There's really nothing special about this one. We have a few respawning enemies to deal with, both on the left and right sides of the map, so we do have to be careful to not put any characters in a place where they'll get attacked multiple times in one turn. We want to keep on building up those friendship levels as we can, and we can finish this map by having Symbios use the map move command all the way at the north side. Now make sure to pick up the treasures before you leave, and on this map, and some of the others, you can wander it and get treasure chests once the battle ends, but you can't always do that. So it's best to get treasures during battle if you can. Once the battle is completed, we've got our treasures, we'll head on north out of here, and we'll immediately enter the next battle, which is the final one of this chapter. So once we clear the valley, we enter a cutscene. Thieves working for Sharaf, their chief, brag about how he knew the conference would fail because of his connections. Benetrim finds it suspicious that a bandit chief would know about the conference debacle, and the Force decides they need to find Sharaf and figure out exactly what he knows. On this battle map, we encounter our first set of ruins. You must have found the ruin map to be able to enter them. Each ruin has a corresponding map, and there's only one ruin and one map in every chapter. Now when we first encounter most ruins, we'll get the option to investigate them, and then a thief or two will show up and enter them. You have to place characters in the ruins individually, and you do that by placing them basically in the front of the ruins, and then using the map move command that shows up instead of the hold command. You will only see that at the entrance. And Symbios cannot enter the ruins. As the leader, he has to stay on the main battlefield at all times. Now, I'll only go into details about how ruins work once, and then I'll just show them to you as we go on. So thieves will always enter ruins, and that's how they begin. There are multiple special chests in each ruin that are locked and can only be opened by thieves. They look different from normal chests, and if you try to open them with one of your characters, the chest will just shake and it'll say that it's locked. Now there are also sometimes normal chests inside of ruins, and these you can open, and the many barrels that we'll find inside ruins usually contain at least a couple of items. Now what you have to do here is let the thief open those special chests and take the items out. Each time you attack a thief, you'll knock one of the items they had out of their hands. So if you let them open 2 chests, you attack them once, they drop the first item, you attack them again, they drop the second. And you're basically just going to rinse and repeat this until you have all items. But you have to make absolutely sure not to kill the thieves before you get everything they've got. You only have 1 shot at each ruin. Once all the thieves are dead, the ruin will collapse, and everyone in your team that you put in there will be placed back onto the main battle. Generally speaking, you want to put characters who have high movement and good defense in the ruins. You may also want to bring very weak weapons for them to use to help make sure that you don't kill thieves accidentally. Also, make sure to not position your characters in front of any of the locked chests. If you obstruct a thief before he opens the chest, it will never go back and open the chest, and you will lose that item forever. Once thieves take all the items they can, they head for exits, and each ruin usually has 2 or 3 different exits. Now you can block the exits with your characters if you bring enough characters in. Just make sure you don't leave Symbios unprotected on the main map. If he dies, the battle ends, and you won't be able to go back to the ruins, and you'll lose anything that the thieves had on them that you didn't already pick up. Also, never use the Aggress spell while you have characters in the ruins before you've gotten everything. If you use the Aggress spell, you won't be able to access the ruins again the next time you come back. Once the thieves enter the ruins, that's it. You've got to finish them during this battle. And as for the ruins, that's really all I have to say about it. Now as for the main battle itself, there's really not too much to go over. The ruin is in the upper left area, and you have to do it during battle, so make sure that you do it during battle. You'll encounter quite a few archers and slightly stronger enemies on this map. There's no special strategy to employ, just do the normal things like spacing your characters out when in range of magic users, and keeping them together when they're not, so you can try and build and take advantage of friendships. Take out all the bandits here, and the battle will end. The dying bandit leader of the bunch realizes King Benetrim is here, and this is Symbios' force. Dentares presses him for information on how Sharaf knew the conference would fail, but the bandit mocks him and then dies. Benetrim comments that they have to act to prevent more needless death, and the group leaves for the city of Railhead. Thus ends Chapter 1.
That's the end of that chapter.
Chapter 2 begins with a flyover of the city of Railhead. It's pretty big. We watch Grace make her way through the city back to our HQ. We then cut to a train arriving at the station. Grace is shocked at the size of the locomotive. Unfortunately, the Force discovers that General Prodon and his army aren't here as expected. They're off fighting Imperial General Garzel. Lantares laments that the Empire seems to always be one step ahead of them. Benetrim and the Force plan to get on the train and take it back into Republic territory. They bought tickets and everything. In the interim, before the train arrives, we're free to explore Railhead. As usual, there's stuff to find and pick up. Make especially sure to get the ruin map here in town. It's in a chest in one of the buildings. The other major things to find here are a lucky cookie and some mithril. Don't worry too much about the mithril. You'll find way more of it than you ever will actually need throughout this game. Head to the tavern and you'll encounter Julian, who is one of our main heroes and will be the protagonist of Scenario 3. He won't join us now, so we're just going to go ahead and move on. Once we reach the train station, a whole bunch of soldiers show up. Just our luck, it's the Imperial Army, and they're looking for us under the orders of Prince Arant. Great, all that money we spent on those expensive train tickets went to waste, and it's time for Plan B. We head to the warehouse to smuggle ourselves onto the train with the cargo, but instead, we find ourselves in battle number 6. This one is a bit of a pain. First off, when we get into the warehouse, the bandits are checking the place out, planning to pilfer anything that's not nailed down. We open one suspicious crate and find a foreign girl named Irene inside of it. Turns out she can fight, and she teaches one of the goons a lesson. Just then, one of the bandits here notices Symbios' force. Benetrim tells us we have to save the girl and the fight begins. Now you have to get to Irene and talk to her if you want to recruit her. I can almost promise you that you will fail at reaching her the first time you play this game. I know I did. What we've got to do here is send characters into the holes in some of the crates, which takes them into a sub-map, and then they can exit at the other end. You want to make sure to move as many spaces as you can on each turn and not engage enemies unless you either have to or they're reachable from the spot where you stop anyway. Basically, you want to keep moving whenever you can. Oh, and a quick note, you can move Symbios into the crates even though he normally can't enter secondary maps. He can do it here. And don't get discouraged if you fail to reach Irene your first time through. If that happens and the enemies kill her, I suggest taking out some enemies to level up a bit without finishing the map, and then have Symbios cast Aggress, come back, try again. I strongly recommend recruiting Irene. It's completely worth it since she's a monk with decent attack strength and healing magic. You must talk to her on the battle map in order to get her to join you. Once she's joined, it's okay if she dies after that on the map. Anyway, once you've got Irene, kill all the enemies to win the battle. In the aftermath of the skirmish, everyone realizes what an awful mess they made here, and that the train and cargo will be completely inspected now, and they have no chance of hiding themselves in it. So it's time to go back to the town, do some party maintenance, buy any equipment we couldn't afford before, and then head out through the town's main gate. Right outside Railhead, we encounter Julian. Julian offers to help us catch the train so we don't have to face the daunting prospect of a long, dangerous walk through Imperial territory. Julian calls us rubes for thinking we could only get on the train at the station in Railhead. We're interrupted by an Imperial army of birdmen, soldiers, and mages. Julian officially joins the force, and battle number 7 begins. Now, the ruin for this chapter is in this battle. It's the building in the center of the map. I suggest taking out a good chunk of enemies before you investigate the ruin and enter it. Let the thieves open the chests before attacking them, and be careful not to kill them before getting everything from the ruin, and that's all we're going to say there. Now let's discuss Julian for a moment. Spoiler alert, he's only with us temporarily, but he'll be in the Force for a good while, so you absolutely should work on training him and getting his level up. I just wouldn't do it at the expense of the other permanent characters, especially weaker ones. This battle has a pretty broad mix of enemy types, so be prepared to put everything you've learned to use in it. It's not too tough since it's a pretty open map at least, and remember, for the birdmen at the end of the map, Hayward's going to be strong against them and do extra damage. I suggest trying your best to lure them out one or two at a time by positioning some of your characters just within their attack range. Once they get close and start attacking you, that's when you can make use of Hayward and some of the stronger fighters that you've got. After we take out the enemies, Julian leads everyone to the rail switching point where they can catch the train, and you immediately walk into a cutscene that begins the next battle. The most infamous battle of all of Shining Force 3 battles across all 3 scenarios. I kid you not, folks. Once we enter the switching point, Mascarin observes that the Destonian Empire border guards are here in force. Dontares is undaunted by the large number of guards and suggests taking them all out before any more show up. Just then, 5 refugees enter the scene. They're fleeing from the Empire and hope to get on the train at the switching point and take it into the Republic of Aspinia. Then, complicating matters even more, the Aspinian General Varlant shows up with the remnants of his forces, who were apparently defeated by General Spiriel after their encounter in Chapter 1. The refugees are relieved at first and ask for his protection in getting to Aspinia. Varlant accuses them of taking advantage of the chaos to sneak into the Republic. General Varlant then tells them they'll either have to join his force or give up all their belongings. The refugees are shocked because the Republic has a reputation for treating people fairly. Just then, more border guards arrive. Yeah, you know this battle's gonna be crazy, but there's plenty of crazy left to come before this one starts. These border guards tell General Varlant to leave those citizens of the Empire alone so they can capture and punish them according to Imperial law. General Varlant calls the refugees selfish peasants and says he'll kill them along with all the border guards. Then, the border guards and everyone else notice Symbiosis' force. Benetrim denigrates Varlant, saying that he's failed to uphold the principles upon which the Republic was founded. Varlant, who apparently can't read the room, asks if we're there to help him. I always say no here because f*** that guy. Varlant is pissed and goes on about how every country depends on a strong military to survive. Grace tries her best to calm down Varlant, but Varlant is just crazed and says he'll kill every Imperial and burn the entire Empire to the ground. Just then, another group arrives. This time it's Prince Median of the Destonian Empire, along with his own force. He tells us he'll take care of Varlant's army. Median says he came here to talk to Benetrim and Symbios, but they have to deal with this crisis first. Median confirms he's a good guy by saying the military should protect people, not oppress them. His centaur soldier companion Campbell doesn't take kindly to anyone who threatens civilians either. Median tells us to get the border guards while he takes care of Varlant, so that neither of us have to battle people from our own countries. Sounds like a plan. The border guards call Median stupid and immature, vowing to destroy Symbios' army. After some encouragement from Benetrim, we can finally start the battle. Okay, so a few things here. Most people hate this battle. I mean, hate it with a capital H. I have to say, while I found it maddening at first too, I now think this battle is absolutely brilliant, and it's one of the most complex battles with the most moving parts I've encountered in any strategy RPG on any platform. You really have to execute it flawlessly if you want the best outcome. Saving all of the refugees is really tough, and you will not do it on your first try on your own. You will need a guide, I promise. You'll be egressing and coming back here a lot if you want to save them, because things will go wrong. I will stress, saving them is optional, but it does affect some minor things in Scenario 2 and 3, and it also nets you 50 experience points for each character in your party at the end of the battle. So really, rescuing them, I think, is very much worth it. Plus, again, we're the good guys, right? And in an interesting twist, we actually control the refugees here, and we don't want our guys to die, do we? Besides, we're not going to let the border guards kill innocent people, so what follows is a brief guide to saving the refugees. First up, you'll want most characters to be around level 6 or so at the start of this battle. If you're far below that still, you should definitely do a little grinding here. Your first goal is to hit the switch between the 2 tracks in the upper left corner of the map. If you want to save the refugees, you must do this. And you must do it before the train on the left progresses onto the track. The trains advance a little bit at the end of each turn, and if you try to hit the switch after the train is already on that track, it won't do anything. If you fail to hit the switch in time, the upper train will block the refugees from crossing the upper track, dooming them to get killed by the border guards. It's unavoidable at that point. Really, your only choice here is to use Dantares. Make sure he's moving the max number of spaces he can on every turn headed towards that switch. If he gets held up even a little bit or blocked by an enemy, you really just need to restart right at that point. You'll want to get at least another 2 or 3 characters over that first track around the time that Dantares hits the switch before the bottom train comes and blocks them. You'll need these other characters to protect the refugees. Symbios or Julian are especially useful here, since if they're in range of enemies, they tend to get targeted more. This is also essential. If you don't get at least 2 other characters above the lower track before the lower train arrives, you may as well start over. For the refugees, march them as many spaces as they can move at a time toward that opening in the fence just above the upper track. Max movement every time. After you have Dantares hit the switch, start moving refugees across the upper track towards the western side of the map, keeping them as far away from enemies as you can. Note that no characters are allowed to end a turn standing on the track. The game just won't let you do it. This means you won't be able to move the refugees the max number of spaces on one turn while you position them close to the track in preparation to cross it. This is why it's essential that you move the max number of spaces you can on all other turns. Now, as soon as you're able, you want to get Symbios or Julian between the 2 tracks and headed east, hopefully in range of the gaggle of border guards there. Keep moving the refugees west while staying as far away from the border guards as you can. Most refugees will die in a single hit. The leader can take 2 hits and also has a healing herb. As soon as you can get Dantares and anyone else you've got between the tracks heading east, do that, and within a couple of turns, your force should be in front of the refugees. Also, the rest of your force will now be cut off by the train on the bottom track. You can start moving them east towards the enemies there. Meanwhile, in the middle of the map, make sure to take out all the border guards here. And I suggest you keep moving the refugees to the west end of the map, where it's going to be safe for them, as long as you took out all the enemies chasing them. Now, your strategy and execution have to be almost pitch perfect here to save everyone. Don't get frustrated if you have to do it over a few times to get it right. It is really tough, but it's also really satisfying to pull it off. Anyway, for the rest of this map, be sure to get the ring hidden in the rocks between the upper and lower tracks. Take out all the enemies. Everything is pretty easy once the refugees are safe. There is a mage here along with some ranged attackers, so you'll need to be a little bit careful with your magic users. And don't get too cocky after saving the refugees. If you let Symbios die after that, you will not be happy, folks. A recording note, it took me about 5 tries to get it right for this recording, and I'd done it before. I'd just forgotten some of the nuance of what you had to do, since it had been years since I last played this game. Anyway, once the battle is over, the border commander tells Median the die is cast and he's in for some shit. We'll then collect our bonus experience and probably have several characters gain levels. Finally, the forces of Symbios and Median have a chance to talk. We tell Median's team about the imposter that kidnapped the Emperor and that they're with the Bullzone cult. Median tells us he's also fought Bullzone monks. King Benetrim then tells Median that the Emperor was taken away by ship. Median and his force leave to meet with General Rogan, who is loyal to Median, to ask him for help. Then one of Varlant's soldiers, a paladin named Sybil, approaches. She laments that she wasn't there for Varlant when he died. She knew that he'd gone nuts but was loyal to her commander and regrets leaving him to die. Benetrim absolves her of responsibility and we invite her to join up with us, which she does. We watch the train advance a little before it stops, and then it's all aboard. Finally, the toughest battle to completely win in the entire game is over. With that ordeal behind us, Symbios has a chance to explore the train. Everyone complains the train car stinks, except those who complain about the other people complaining. Everyone decides to open the doors on both the north and south ends of the train to get some air in that place. If we exit out the car to the west, we'll find another train car that has all the refugees in it, along with some other people we can talk to, and even an item and weapon shop. Stock up on some new things, get them while you can. We then head back to the original car and then go east. We'll be in a room with a whole bunch of chickens. Go east again. There's a priest here if you need to do any party maintenance. Now it's time to start getting one of the game's secret characters. There's something we have to do here in this room right now. We want to climb on top of the crates by walking up some of the bags of feed, and then we'll search the single barrel way up high to get the chicken feed. After we get the chicken feed, we need to go back one car to the chickens. On the south side of this room, we'll see a chicken just sitting there on top of a box with some feed next to it that we can walk up. We have to go up to this chicken, and we must open the menu manually in front of the chicken and use the feed on it. The chicken will then start following us. We've got to take it back to the main car with our force, and when we're done exploring here and picking up items and talking to everyone, we can go ahead and speak to Benetrem to start the next battle by pushing up towards the open door of the train on the north side. The force peeks outside the train and sees once again that those pesky bandits are attacking. We learn when they head into our train car that Governor Garvin of Saraband is involved with them and gets a cut of what they steal. We also learn that while the trains are normally off limits to the bandits, Prince Orant of Destonia, that's Median's brother again, gave them special permission for this attack. Battle number 9 is pretty straightforward and simple, a nice break after the last one. Just take out all the enemies in the train car and you're done. One of the flying bandits will unhook the passenger car during this battle, and it'll fall behind. For this fight, all the normal recommendations apply. Don't bunch up in range of the magic users. Make sure you're using Hayward when possible to take out flying enemies. Don't let anyone get surrounded. Defeat all the bandits, and the battle ends. Benetrem says they have to get the engineer to stop the train. Eldar the bird soldier and her brother Zero show up. They're from Flagger, the homeland of Symbios, and most of the force with him. They stayed behind to guard his father, Lord Conrad. Zero lets us know the bridge we're hurtling towards is out. Some of the track is broken in front of it. Benetrem says we have to take out the bandits on top of the train, get to the engineer, and stop the train. So begins battle number 10, the final battle of Chapter 2. Benetrem recognizes Sharaf, the chief of these bandits. Sharaf says he's working with the Destonian Empire and won't listen to any requests from Benetrem. Zero goes back to try and save the passenger car, while his sister Eldar permanently joins the force. Now, don't worry about anything plot-wise. You can egress if you want to revive anyone, save your game, or do anything else you can do with the priest menu. This battle is also relatively simple until you get near the front car or the engine of the train. Most of the battle is pretty open, but the inclined netting to the west will slow everyone's movement except Eldar's. With our bird soldier Eldar, we now have someone that can fly over basically any type of terrain, so take advantage of that when appropriate. But don't send Eldar too far off by herself. Her defense isn't great at this point and won't be for a while. So this battle really isn't too tough, but Sharaf and the enemies with him at the train engine are a little bit more difficult and hit hard, so you need to be careful. The train engine is also a serious choke point with just one column of tiles that's traversable. There are really no surprises here, just be super careful around Sharaf and make sure Symbios doesn't die or you'll be starting this fight over. So keep going until you defeat Sharaf and then the battle ends. With his dying breaths, Sharaf expresses shock that he was defeated and tells Benetrem killing him was a mistake and that the bandits will run rampant without a leader. King Benetrem presses him for information on how the bandits have known all the moves that the force has made. Sharaf just scoffs and tells them that Prince Median won't help them and that, quote, the prince will be your stumbling block. King Benetrem sends Dantares to the engineer to stop the train and then wonders to himself about the connection between the Vandal, Bolzome, and Orant. The train manages to stop just before the section of tracks that's damaged in front of the bridge, and Zero returns, having saved the passenger car all by himself. King Benetrem says that they should continue north. This will lead the force to the cursed village of Quonos. Julian smirks and when questioned says he doesn't know the area. Benetrem tells Zero to go to Prince Median and guard him, because if anything should happen to the impartial prince who has been an ally up to this point, it would damage the fragile peace between the Republic of Espinia and the Empire of Destonia. Zero flies off to Aneffect Village, where he supposes Median's team will have to stop. That concludes Chapter 2.
That's the end of that chapter.
Chapter 3 begins in our HQ in the cursed village of Quonos, and the place seems abandoned. Everyone comments on how creepy it is, and Grace says that she can sense evil in the village. Everyone also notices that Julian seems to have run off. Dantares is apparently a bit afraid of ghosts, and the team gives him some shit for that, and then we take off to explore the village. For now, we can go into the houses and search for some items. One of the things we can find here is a Brave Apple, which is an instant level up, but you want to use that on a character whose experience is as close to 0 as possible, because it just ups your level and then sets experience to 0. So if you use it on someone with like 95 experience, let's say, it's a total waste. You only got 5 experience points out of it. Also here we can read about the Kyonshi, who are essentially zombies. We've learned that they're controlled by evil powers and that we should make them go to sleep. That's actually an important hint. We also learn that the house across the river belongs to Governor Garvin of Saraband. As we explore the village, we see a few poltergeist-like activities with crates, tables, and chairs flying around, but they're harmless. There's a pixie at the church who will let you open the priest menu and take care of any party maintenance that you need to do. And I'll mention right now, at this point in the game, you can promote your characters at level 10, but you shouldn't. I'd say to get everyone to about level 14 to 16 if you can, since the higher stats will carry over as a base to their promoted class. Please note, in this game, Scenario 1, you can only promote once. Anyway, after we do all that stuff, it's on to the graveyard, which has a big spooky mansion in it. It's thought that a vandal lives here. Explore for a bit, try to leave, and then we'll meet Khan, a monk of Elbasem. He's here to defeat the vandal that lives in Quonos. Julian shows up and wanted to do the very same thing. Grace doubts that vandals even really exist, and Julian tells Grace that his father was killed by a very real vandal named Galm. Julian's dedicated his entire life to seeking revenge against Galm. Just then, zombies! Time for battle number 11, I guess. The rest of the force arrives as something strange and sinister is in the air. Julian apologizes for using us. King Benetrim states he didn't know a vandal was here. We see some Kyonshi bouncing around, and that's when the battle actually starts. Okay, so this one is kind of a pain again. It's nowhere near as bad as the railway switching point battle, but it's bad. The Kyonshi zombie folks, they are actually villagers, so we don't want to kill any of them. We want to save them all. If you do kill any, you might be missing shops and information, and you'll miss an optional character too. So don't do it. In this battle, Khan remains controlled by the computer, but he fights for us. He can use his Elbasem Orb accessory on the Kyonshi to peacefully remove them from the battlefield. You need to let Khan take care of all of them, and some of your characters can get hit pretty hard, so protect your weakest characters with the environment and use your stronger characters as human shields when necessary. As you travel either north or east on the map, other enemies like bats and skeletons will emerge from some of the graves. It's safe to kill these enemies as normal, so take all of them out while you let Khan use the orb on the Kyonshi. It'll probably take a while because the AI controlling Khan acts like a complete doofus sometimes, but that's the price we have to pay for being a hero, I guess. Once all the Kyonshi are gone, the battle ends. Khan says he still senses evil coming from the mansion. He and Julian head to the mansion and bid us goodbye. But we're not having that, are we? Benetrim says it's their duty to defeat the vandal because it's a danger to everyone. Khan permanently joins our force now and becomes controllable. To start the next battle, head to the mansion. Otherwise, go back to the church if you need to do some party maintenance. So when we enter the mansion, we find the place is in shambles. The vandal talks from behind the door on the second floor and tells us we're foolish for challenging a vandal. Khan speaks back to him and the vandal recognizes him as a priest from Elbasem and says that it changes things. He summons a bunch of evil creatures to attack us and the battle begins. Okay, so my personal recommendation here is that you use this battle to get everyone some extra experience and money. Egress, and then come back. Maybe even a few times. You'll want a good amount of money after this battle. You can do some manipulation later in this fight to get experience from the boss, but it takes a long time anyway. And I prefer to be making at least some kind of progress while I grind. As we move around the holes on the floor on the left side of the mansion, enemies will pop out a few of them, including some magic users with area of effect spells. So try not to put your characters next to each other if you can avoid it. Make sure to destroy all the barrels blocking the door in the upper left corner, or you will not have access to this door afterwards. When you reach the stairs, a few more enemies will materialize at the top, so be prepared for that too. Again, I wouldn't devote too much time to Julian. He'll be with us for a bit longer still, and we should still level him up a little, but focus on your core force, especially the magic users. Once we defeat the enemies on the upper floor and reach the doors on the second floor, they'll open up, revealing the vandal Abdark, along with some much tougher enemies like a succubus. Hey Abdark, didn't anyone ever tell you not to talk about money, religion, or politics? Yeesh. Anyway, Benetrim observes that he seems weak for a vandal, weaker than expected. Our goal here is to have Khan use the Elbasem Orb on him, so we can then attack him and damage him normally. We'll want to take out the skeletons and the succubus here first, and some other enemies will spawn in from the holes, including a lich with area of effect magic spells. Now you can block the lich from spawning in by placing Eldar over the hole that he comes from. Just be aware if you go that route that it will spawn after Eldar moves, so unless you plan on keeping her there permanently, you'll have to deal with that thing. Now as for old Abdark himself, he's got the powerful Spark spell, so you want to make sure to position your characters so they can't hit more than one at a time. And with Spark, you probably want to keep them at least 3 squares away from each other. Now at this stage, I would only attack with 2 characters at a time, primarily distance attacks at least 3 spaces away from each other. Once you weaken him, or he runs out of MP, you'll be able to cast that spark spell exactly 4 times. That's when you can rush in with your heavy hitters and finish the job, or just farm experience off of it. Once we defeat Abdark, he blathers on that it wasn't us that beat him, but the power of Elbasem. He says that he's the weakest of his brother Vandals, and Khan's powers and his Elbasem orb will be useless against them. Julian is disappointed that it wasn't the Vandal Golem here, and that his search will have to continue.
The search continues.
Abdark scoffs at Julian, they do a lot of scoffing in this game if you haven't noticed, and says there's no way a mercenary like him could ever defeat Golem. Benetrim presses Abdark for information on who he's working with and how everyone seems to know the movements of the Force. And he also asks if it's their ultimate goal to resurrect Bolzome, the Vandal king of old as it turns out. Abdark asks Bolzome to avenge him and then he dies. Well, guess that answers that question at least. King Benetrim says that he's been concerned ever since Governor Garvin discovered steam technology that there was some sort of link between him and the Vandals. Dontares observes that both the Republic and Empire have been manipulated by the Bolzome sect. As the crew discusses some things, Basanda, the Bolzome high priest we met in Balsamo, shows up. Basanda says she underestimated Symbios and company, but also that Abdark was old and weak. Basanda taunts the Force and says they aren't ready to face her yet, but she has an interesting tool that they'll meet soon, and then she vanishes. Benetrim reminds everyone they're still in Imperial territory and need to get back to the Republic, which is our goal now. We can explore the mansion at this point and read some books and search for some items. There's also something we need to do here to get the secret character Ratchet. We'll encounter this room with a mechanical suit of armor in it. In front of the suit of armor, there's a switch. Examine the switch to trigger a cutscene. We'll see Ratchet here, who won't join us yet, but if we do this now, we'll be able to get him later. If you skip this, you will not be able to recruit him. When we're done exploring, we leave the mansion and we see a solitary wizard named Noon standing in the graveyard. Noon thinks he was accidentally responsible for the situation that left the Vandal in charge of the mansion and town. We say, hey, nah, it's cool. Noon joins us at this point. We can freely examine the town now, including the other building across the river. We get to it by taking the western gate out of the graveyard. If we activate the wheel inside the building by hitting the switch, we can go across the turning wheel and grab the bright honey from the chest, which grants a permanent MP increase to 1 character. Remember when I said you'd want money after that last battle? Quonos now has an item shop, a weapon shop, and an accessory shop. You should get an accessory for anyone that doesn't have one, except for maybe one person, because we'll get an accessory in battle soon. If you're playing through this yourself and you don't have enough money to buy the accessories you want, we can still egress back here from the next battle. Oh, and I would suggest that any mithril or dark matter you've picked up, that you drop it off with Benetrim at HQ. You won't need it for a good long while. Talk to the townsfolk for some color here, and also learn that Garvin was picked on as a kid, and then head on out. Once we're outside, once we cross the bridge in front of us, we'll finally be in Barrand, which is technically in Espinian territory. Although, there are likely some Destonian Imperial forces waiting in the area after that whole event that kicked off the beginning of the game. Benetrim observes that there's a huge Imperial force guarding the bridge. They're led by General Franz, who admires Symbios and wants to grant him an honorable death in combat. So begins Battle 13. Yes, there's quite a few troops here, but don't fret, for once you start moving around a bit, the force in the northeast corner of their map is engaged by another army that arrives on the scene, led by General Spiriel, who seems to be under some sort of mind control. For this battle, I recommend sending a few strong members of the force up to engage the northeastern force. You'll mainly be cleaning up the remains of what Spiriel leaves behind. Since you should have 3 healers now, you'll probably want to send one of your healers with them on that side. Now Franz is a little shook when Spiriel arrives. Spiriel drones on about having to urgently reach the Elbasem statue. Then her White Knights start attacking Franz's Imperial force. He'll take them all out, and then Spiriel's force will retreat over the bridge to the northwest afterwards. When Franz sees Spiriel heading his way and crazed, he orders his troops out of their way and to let them pass. The rest of this fight is pretty much business as usual, so polish off Franz and his forces to put an end to this one. Franz laments Spiriel's involvement and says his gigantic force would have been unbeatable if she hadn't turned on him. With his dying breath, he hails the Destonian Empire. Then, in a hilarious move, Benetrim says there's no time to waste, we have to get to the statue of Elbasem right away. Dontares says, hey, there's a town here, we should rest. Benetrim then agrees and says sure, let's rest. Glad we worked that one out. There are a few important things to do here in the town of Vagabond. First up, of course, do any party maintenance that you need to. Next up, we're going to work on 2 secret characters. We won't get them yet, but we have 2 events we have to do to get them. So first, go up to the tent with the couple and the giant egg. Buy the egg from the woman, take it back to HQ, then use the egg from your inventory on the chicken. You might have to futz around with the camera angles to get it just right. Once you do, the egg will hatch and a little penguin will run away. You must do this now to get Pen later. Also, outside in the northwestern section of town, you can find Ratchet just standing around. Talk to Ratchet again here. His suit will power up and he'll head away from us. As with Pen, this must be done now to recruit Ratchet later. Finally, we can talk to Justin in the large western tent. Justin is an archer from Edmund's army. If you don't remember him, General Edmund was back with us at the peace conference at the beginning of the game, and he was one of the 2 generals that ordered to buy time for Benetrim to escape from Saraband. The other soldiers in this tent are also from Edmund's army, but they're injured. Now, Justin was left behind because he had some sort of falling out with Edmund. What could that be about? We'll find out in just a little bit. There are quite a few items to pick up around town, including the next Ruins map, which is in a chest in the northern section of town. Grab that and whatever else you want, and then head on out. Justin will join us just before we leave, and he's a bow knight, so neat, another ranged attacker is finally in the force. As soon as we leave the village of Vagabond, we notice the Spiriel army is headed towards this big statue of Elbacem on the eastern side of the map. There's not a whole lot to this battle strategy-wise. Basanda shows up early on, but don't worry, you won't be engaging her. When she teleports in, Basanda talks about how the statue protects the Innovators from the Vandals. Now this is a direct connection to Shining the Holy Ark if you weren't aware. There are spirits that can bond with people. If the being that results from the bond is good, they become what's called an Innovator and can accomplish great things with their power and help many people. If the creature that results from the bond is evil, that person becomes a Vandal and capable of great evil and destruction. Basanda says that the Vandals have slept for 1,000 years. The magical barrier that keeps the Vandals at bay will be destroyed in delicious irony by the very people who were supposed to protect it. I'll note here that Spiriel cannot be stopped. Her troops will destroy that statue, so don't stress. Just trust me on this one. I researched it, and even people who have leveled their characters up and gotten Aura level 4 say that it will not heal the statue. Its destruction is very much a part of the plot. After the statue is destroyed, Basanda laughs in victory and tells Spiriel to finish off Symbios and his troops. Then some unseen, powerful presence speaks, and she immediately teleports away to investigate. The next ruin is also in this map, so make sure you're sending enough characters in there to contend with all the thieves and barrels and stuff. One quick note for characters over level 10, they'll get very little experience from this point on. When you change classes, they'll get much more experience for the first few levels than they do now. But I still recommend trying to make it to level 14 or so before you promote. But hey, you do you. If you've got someone who's at least level 10, feel free to promote them right now. Once you defeat the enemies and Spiriel, the battle ends. Basanda is upset because that voice turned out to be Galm, the most powerful Vandal, and he threw her around like a ragdoll. And let's talk about Galm for a sec. Shining Force 3 is actually his second appearance. He showed up earlier in Shining the Holy Ark. That game takes place 10 years before Shining Force 3. And man, oh man, we even met Julian in Shining the Holy Ark. He was just a little kid who said his father went off to investigate a mansion in the woods and never came back. Julian only learned that Galm was the one who killed his father later, and the plot of Shining the Holy Ark was to prevent the revival of the 1,000-year kingdom that some in this game seek to bring back. This references a time when Vandals ruled the world. Anyway, Galm talks about how Bullzome's awakening is almost at hand and may have even already started. Basanda asks Galm not to interfere with her plans. Julian seizes his chance for revenge and rushes at Galm. Galm taunts him at first, then picks him up into the air and tosses him over a cliff into the waters below. Galm then tells Basanda her end nears, and she should prepare for it. After that, Basanda takes Spiriel and floats away. The Force is crushed that Julian was thrown into the rapids, and Mascarin and Grace talk about trying to save him. Benetrim protests at first because of the dire situation everyone is in now, and how critical every second is. At this point, I would suggest heading back to Vagabond to do party maintenance, upgrade weapons, or replenish items, whatever you need to do. Once you're finished in Vagabond, head back out to the bridge for the final battle of Chapter 3, in front of the falls. Battle number 15 begins with a cutscene with everyone trying to figure out the best way to find Julian among these rapids. Just then, an Imperial general named Garzel shows up with his own unit. There are enemies dotted all over the place on this map, but spoiler alert, it's gonna get much worse. Also notice there's a chest only Eldar can reach in the very northeast corner of the map. You'll need to wind your way around this one by going up a ramp to the east and then continuing to snake your way through the difficult landscape. So once we get to the eastern side of the map and progress north, someone else enters the fray right next to Garzel. Why, that's General Edmund, back from the beginning of the game in Saraband. He's betrayed Espinia and tells us to hand over King Benetrim or he'll kill us. He wished the Imperial army had finished us off so that it wouldn't have to come to this. The team wants to know why he betrayed them, and Edmund talks about how the Republic has failed to live up to its ideals and become corrupt. He wants to wash all of that away and bring new leadership to Espinia. King Benetrim tells him change takes time, but Edmund insists that they've just become another corrupt empire. Garzel tells us to surrender, and we of course say no. Edmund calls his troops in, but is shocked to find only a few troops show up and answer his call. Median enters the fray and says he took care of the rest of Edmund's troops. Symbiosis. Median and his company are disgusted by Edmund's treachery. We don't actually see Median and Edmund's main force in this scenario, so we just have to deal with the few extra troops that showed up on this map. From this point on, be careful. I know that treasure out there is tempting, but don't send Eldar too close to it yet. You'll need to take care of the enemy Wing Knights first, or they'll kill her. Lure them toward your troops on the ground, and then finish them off with several attacks. After that, the rest of the battle is pretty straightforward. Once our force reaches the center of the rope bridge here, Garzel and Edmund have a little chat. Edmund tells Garzel to cut the ropes on the bridge. Garzel wants no part of that. He's from the Destonian Empire, and he wants to be able to get back to it. And he also doesn't want to kill any of his own soldiers. Garzel says that he won't do it. And just then, Edmund charges Garzel. Garzel easily repels his attack and knocks him backwards. Edmund falls to the edge of a cliff and clutches onto the cliffside and asks for help. Garzel tells Edmund he'd always planned to kill him anyway. He'll just have to do it a little sooner than planned. With that, he lets Edmund fall to the rapids below. Combat resumes and we're on the final push. We have to clear out the remaining enemies and take out Garzel. By the way, folks, I always kill all the enemies in these maps for the experience, even when you don't have to. Some of these maps, you only have to technically kill the leader to advance. But don't do that. You want the experience, trust me. Once Garzel is defeated, we meet with Median and company on the bridge. They thank Symbios for his message of warning delivered by Zero, and return Zero to the team. Median says we'll need Zero more than he does because of our difficult road ahead. Benetrim tells Median's team about the destruction of the Elbasem statue by the Bullzone sect, and asks if they're going to go to Elbasem next. Elbasem being a town in this case. Median and his force agree to investigate, and make their exit. After they're gone, the team contemplates Edmund's death. Benetrim says they should remember him for the exceptional and brave general that he was, and that he died fighting for his principles. We learn that Benetrim and Symbios' father Lord Conrad were targets of much ire in Aspinia for their attempts to make life more fair and abolish the aristocracy. Benetrim laments the bloodshed that follows clashes in ideology. Well said, sir, but that's life. Everyone heads out to Aspia Castle. On the way out, Khan wonders if he should have left the orb with Median.
That's the end of that chapter.
Okay, folks, I know this is a long video, so here's a quick little intermission. We'll resume with the second half of the game in just a few moments. Now, I don't normally do this kind of thing mid-video, so forgive me this one time. If you're enjoying yourself, you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and please like the video. Share it with people that you think will like it. This video took about 90 hours to make. That includes playing the game, researching it, writing the script, recording the voiceover, editing it, and getting it all into a video, rendering it, compressing it, and uploading it. If you'd like to help support the time and effort that goes into making videos like this, consider giving me either ongoing support via Patreon or YouTube channel memberships, or a one-time show of support via Ko-fi or here on YouTube through things like Super Thanks. I don't put any videos behind a paywall, and would appreciate any help you can give. It's easy to forget that we're all people here, and I'm a person in particular who supports 5 humans, 5 cats, and 2 dogs at the moment. Alright, enough of that palaver. Let's move on to the second half of the summary/walkthrough/strategy guide for Shining Force 3 Scenario 1. Chapter 4 begins in HQ. Symbios and Dontares are away, presumably in the castle, while the rest of the crew chats among themselves. We learn that the economy of Aspinia is in bad shape and one of the nation's own armies from Bearsol is demanding aid. We learn the Bearsol army is headed up by Brutus, ranked only below King Benetrim himself since he's the vice chairman of the assembly. Our crew is shocked that he's trying to squeeze money out of the country. They wonder what the Bearsol army is going to do. Khan has another worry, that if they encounter another Vandal they won't be able to defeat it since the Elbasem statue that weakens them is now rubble. Eldar worries that Median is headed into danger. Then we change perspectives to a meeting in the castle between Benetrim, Symbios, Dontares, General Tybalt, who we met at the start of the game, and General Pfefford, who we're just meeting right now. Tybalt is taken aback by Edmund's treachery. We learn that the weather has been rough and that Aspinia has never been a fertile land. They haven't grown enough crops to feed everyone and they don't have the ability to aid anyone else. King Benetrim moves on to discuss how the Bearsol army, led by Brutus, is demanding tribute. Pfefford says Aspia's resources should be shared among all regions of the Republic. Benetrim asks what he'd have him do. Just then a messenger advises a unit from the Bearsol army is advancing towards Storage, a town that houses Aspinia's provisions. How about that? Sounds kind of like storage. Benetrim reluctantly sends Symbios and his force to investigate instead of sending him on home to Flaggard, which was the original plan. From this point we get control and can explore the castle and the surrounding town. Before we leave the castle we run into Braff. Braff admires Symbios' excellent reputation. He asks if we're moving against the Bearsol army. We learn that Braff is Pfefford's son, and as we leave, he tells us we'll meet again. Along the bridge, our bird soldiers fly to have an emergency chat with Symbios. They tell him that Median's force is in danger from the increased power of the Bullzone monks. Zero agrees to fly back out to Median with the Elbasem orb to help counter those enemies, and he's gone. There are a few things to do around town. Make sure to find a good amount of the mithril hidden around here. Also make sure to go into Horst the Dwarf's house and recruit him. Check out the shops, do any party maintenance you need to. Feel free to push the hooker around town, but it won't accomplish anything. Once we're done goofing off, we head on out. After we exit the town, we pass through the open outer gate and begin the first battle of this chapter. We start in the northeast of the map and notice the Bear Soul unit heading towards storage. They pick up the pace when they see us, so off we go. This is about as basic a battle as there is in this game. Just employ the normal Shining Force techniques that you've learned up to this point, and you'll be fine. Try and work on those friendship levels if you can. There are a few new enemies here, but most of them aren't especially tough, though some of them do hit pretty hard now. Beware of enemy archers and magic users, so watch that positioning. Again, I recommend taking out all the enemies, so you'll want to save the Force Commander for last. Now, if you're under-leveled at this stage in the game, this isn't too bad a fight to egress from and come back to a couple of times if needed. Soon as we finish that battle, we see the gate to Aspia has been closed, locking us out and also preventing us from going to Flaggard. Oh, and to cut any confusion, Aspia is the castle and town, Aspinia is the country. Grace speculates someone is trying to keep them away from Flaggard. Man, this Republic sure doesn't seem to have its act together, does it? So much betrayal. Anyway, on we go to storage. Now we have a few things to do in storage. Make sure to get the ruin map from a chest in town, and we can finally recruit Pen, the half-hatched baby penguin. He's notoriously the worst character in this game. You'll find Pen in one of the corners of the town behind some houses next to a tree. Talk to the people here and you'll learn that we stopped the Bear Soul Force just in time. Anyway, this town is pretty depressing. Let's not spend too much time here. We do want to check out the shops and make sure that we look for deals from now on too. Oh, and before we leave, there's kind of a funny moment here in storage. If we head to the bar/restaurant where the train station employees hang out, we'll see that the station workers complain that the drinks in the Republic are terrible, and they ask if it's because the people here are so poor. If we talk to the bartender though, we'll find out that he's specifically making them bad drinks on purpose because they're jerks. Good on ya. Then we leave town to get this show on the road already. As soon as we leave storage, someone notices that we're heading towards the mountain tunnel that happens to be a dangerous shortcut to Flaggard that has a dragon inside. But with the gates of Aspia closed, it's the only way to get there. Whoever is yelling at us in the distance says they won't let us pass. It's another Bear Soul unit, hooray! We learn here that General Pfeffert has betrayed the Republic. What a shock. The Bear Soul army is like, nuh-uh, he didn't betray the Republic. It was all Benetrim and Conrad, and that they're hiding food and money because the amount that they shared indicates that they must have much more, and they're only giving them scraps. Dontares tells the Bear Soul force that they should bring any grievances before the assembly. The Bear Soul leader says that would accomplish nothing because of the corrupt lords who line their pockets with gold. Man, we've got some pretty heavy political stuff going on in this game, huh? Anyway, the Bear Soul commander threatens to smash us to pieces if we advance. Hey, that's better. We can understand that as a plot point. Let's go hit things. This is another battle that isn't too tough, but the sands here are hard to traverse and will really hamper the movement range of many characters. The ruin here is on the west side of the map. As usual, you want to get about 4 or 5 characters into the ruin. If you've got Pen with you here, you'll see this little jerk starts at level 1 of his non-promoted class. You have a choice to make here, folks. You can level up Pen by giving him easy kills with enemies that have 1 hit point left, or a few if you want to take a chance of him doing a special attack, or you can wait until nearer the end of the game, where it will be a little easier to level him up, but you'll have to do a lot of grinding. I did things the hard way and brought him with me to this battle, and will for almost all future battles, because I'm a masochist. Pen is the only character in all of Shining Force that I actually equipped with a cursed item. I don't remember if he can equip it in his original class or if he has to be promoted. There's an evil ring that especially is useful because it adds 15 to his attack, but it will curse him, and that'll cause him to either lose turns occasionally or sometimes lose hit points. So it's your choice on how you want to handle Pen here. So you'll see that I finally promoted a few characters to their second classes here. Some I got a little tired of waiting for and just promoted them at around levels 12 or 13. Back to the battle, it really is pretty easy and straightforward aside from the ruin, which as usual is kind of a pain. Regarding the main battle, just be careful when you get near the cave because a lot of enemies are bunched together, and that includes some enemy mages and priests with area of effect spell attacks. You want to spread your characters out in that area and make use of your ranged attackers there. Bring in the heavy hitters to finish off the enemies when possible. The boss here is technically the commander, so make sure to take him out last if you want to get as much experience as possible. When we do finally take him out, the battle ends, and with his dying breath, he tells us he was just here to delay us, and if we dare go into the cave, the dragon will kill us. After all that, we'll automatically recruit a new character. This will be Ratchet, and this only happens if you did as I instructed and talked to him in both the mansion and Vagabond. Ratchet is okay, and he has attacks with a range of 2, so that's useful. Anyway, at this point I head back to storage to save, revive people, do general party maintenance, and then I head right back to the cave. Once we arrive inside the cave, everyone whines that this cave with its lava below is just like hell. Dontarez tells everyone to be cheery and we get on with the fight. Oh, and with this one we technically just have to get Symbios out of the cave, but what fun is that? I'm gonna kill everything and show you how. So be aware throughout this map, as you advance, enemies will spawn in. Sometimes right in front of you, sometimes off to the sides, sometimes behind you. The biggest threats here are the baby dragon and the wyverns that spawn in when you get about halfway through. They have powerful attacks that can make short work of basically anyone on the force. Now they are susceptible to status attacks like sleep, however. Sleep is going to be pretty useful from this point on until near the very end of the game. Anyway, once you've killed everything or moved Symbios on, the battle ends. Time to rush to Flaggard before Fafhrd wrecks up the place. Soon as we exit the cave, we head right into battle number 19. Fafhrd's force is heading towards Flaggard. Fafhrd stops the invasion of Flaggard to deal with Symbios' force when he notices him, and talks about taking the pleasure of killing Symbios for himself. Geez, why are all these Republic generals such gigantic ass? Are there any generals in Espinia loyal to their own country? Anywho, Team Flaggard, that's Symbios, Dontarez, Mascarin, and Grace, vow to stop Fafhrd from destroying it and protect Symbios' father, Lord Conrad. Dontarez warns that they need to advance quickly so they don't get caught between the two enemy forces on the map. Those on the west side of the map from Aspia, and Fafhrd's forces to the east near Flaggard. There's nothing special about this battle, just keep moving and take out Fafhrd. I took out everyone. When the battle is over, Fafhrd tells Symbios to finish him off. Symbios declines, and Dontarez says Symbios would never kill a man for trying to feed starving people. Hey, Dontarez, he took up arms against his own country, killed people, and was about to assassinate Lord Conrad. He even says it. Everyone basically says, I forgive you.
I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you.
And Fafhrd says he'll speak to Lord Conrad to verify everything that they've told him about Benetrim and Conrad being framed for holding back resources is the truth. After that feel-good moment, Fiale shows up and finishes off the weakened Fafhrd. Fiale then heads into town after taunting us about meeting Lord Conrad. Fafhrd squeezes out some dying words. He says he believes Symbios, but asks him to just investigate his suspicions about Conrad. Symbios agrees to honor the dying man's wishes. Okay, we're in Flaggard now, home of Symbios, Dontarez, Mascarin, Grace, and technically also Eldar and Zero since they work for Conrad. There's a few things you can do before moving on. First, you'll want to recruit Frank the werewolf here by pushing him into the headquarters in town. Yep, the prostitute pushing from Aspio is really just training for this. Frank ain't great, so be prepared for that. You can also pick up some items here, mainly some mithril. If you want, you can examine the pile of rubble to see Pen jump out and dash away. You can't catch him or anything, and it doesn't serve any purpose. I'll also note here that you probably want to switch characters out as their levels get high and work on the other characters with lower levels. Why? Because later on in this game, you'll have one battle where you have to use everyone. So you want to be ready for that, and you don't want to have to do a bunch of grinding at the very end of the game. When you're ready to move on, the path forward is kind of confusing and stupid. You'll notice that all the townspeople are gathered in the church. You have to walk behind the altar and then talk to the priest. If you do this, he has dialogue that pushes the story forward. If you talk to him from in front of the altar, you just get the normal priest menu for party maintenance. So go behind the altar and speak to him. You'll learn about a secret passage into the castle. If we look at the wall on the northern side of the town, we'll find a few emblems. There's one on the left side in particular that we can examine now. If we search it, it opens, and we can traverse a single tile-wide passageway that comes out in a fireplace in a house of some kind. We exit the door to begin the next battle, which is already the final one of this chapter. As this battle begins, we see Lord Conrad behind a desk. He sees Symbios and warns him not to come any closer. We continue forward and get repeated warnings. But Fiale shows up before we can reach Conrad. Conrad tells Symbios to leave and that he can't be saved. Fiale slaps Conrad to shut him up. After some more chin-wagging, the battle begins with Symbios up front and the rest of the force at the back of the map. There is only one important thing here, and it affects Scenario 2. There is a character in Scenario 2 you can only recruit if you attack Fiale in this fight and pick up the key that he drops. If you do not do this, you cannot, I repeat, cannot recruit this secret character in Scenario 2 at all. It's not a huge loss, but if you want a 100% Shining Force 3, you have to get that key. Now if you're over-leveled here, it's pretty easy. If you're under-leveled, then it's really hard. Fiale leaves the fight after just a few turns, so you don't have long to grab that key. Anyway, the cluttered environment in this battle actually makes it a little bit easy, even though the enemies themselves are tough. You can block enemies by occupying the spaces between columns and counters so that your distance attackers can have at them from behind your stronger characters. Fiale will escape this fight and he cannot be killed here, so after you get the key, just back off if you survive long enough. Oh, another note, the key must be in one of your character's active inventory when the battle ends. So for example, if you get the key, egress back to town, and put it into your HQ storage, you won't be able to unlock the character in Scenario 2. Anyway, for this battle, we just have to kill all enemies to end it. Once we do, we see that Conrad is gravely injured. As Conrad begins to fade, he asks Symbios to find Pulsis. Zero shows up just in time to watch Conrad die. Grace tries to heal him, but it's no use. He was harmed by an evil so great it cannot be counteracted by a priest. And the whole team is shaken by this sad event.
That's the end of that chapter.
Chapter 5 begins on a somber note as everyone deals with the death of Lord Conrad. Zero gives the Elbasem orb back to Khan and heads off to reunite with Median's army. The Force hopes that this link between Espinia and Dystonia will lead to peace in the future. We learn that our next destination will be Lookover, where Duke Pulsis lives in seclusion. Symbios alone kneels before his father's flower-adorned coffin, while the other natives of Flaggard on the team stand behind him. Symbios' friends whisper to give him a few more moments. Dantares also wants to pay his respects to Conrad, but is concerned that Fiale will get to Duke Pulsis before they can. Symbios stands back up and is ready to head to Lookover to find Duke Pulsis. After this scene, we're free to explore all of Flaggard. Make sure to get the Phoenix Sword in the chest in the fort. One thing especially of note here in the town itself is that it has one of the game's 2 blacksmiths in it, but it is a bit hard to find. He's located here, down a narrow alley between these 2 buildings. You can bring him mithril, small mithril, or dark matter. The blacksmith can only craft cursed items out of dark matter, so for me, I don't even usually bother with it. He can make accessories out of small mithril and weapons out of regular mithril ore though. They're pricey but are usually worth it and are much better than what you get in the town weapon shop here. The way the blacksmith works is you pick a material and then select the character that you want him to make something for. He gives you a price, you accept, leave the shop, and you can come back in immediately and it'll be ready. You do not have to wait, just go straight back into the shop. You may want to save before making something in case you get something you don't want. Also, he makes weapons based on what's currently equipped on a character. So, for example, if you want a powerful spear for Dantares, make sure he's equipped with a spear when he's selected and not a lance. There's also an accessory shop here in town, but making mithril accessories is usually cheaper. After we finish everything we want to do here in Flaggard, we exit the town and Symbios will walk by himself into a brand new map area. After our little stroll, the next battle begins. Battle number 21. A bunch of masked Bulzo monks are on their way to Lookover to kill Pulsis, so we need to take care of that problem on the way there. This is a pretty easy, straightforward battle to start the chapter that doesn't require any special strategies. There are a few enemies here that will spawn in as you move north across the map. Notably, wyverns will show up near the waterfalls and bloodborns will show up on either side just a bit north of the bridge. When you kill them, they'll spawn in multiple times, which makes this a pretty good place to earn some experience. Also, there's a chest with a glove hidden near the trees on the western side of the map just across the bridge a little bit. It can be a little hard to spot, but if you rotate the camera around and keep a close look on that area, you'll see it. I will also say I think this is another battle that's pretty good to egress away from and come back to a few times, especially if you want to make some money to have the blacksmith forge some good mithril equipment. Also, I'd strongly suggest really focusing on leveling up Eldar if you haven't done that yet. You want her defense to be as strong as possible. Anyway, once we're done on this map, we head into Lookover Village. Once in Lookover, there's a few things to pick up, including our next ruin map. Also, have you been searching fireplaces? There's some mithril ore in one here. You'll also find a cursed evil ring that may be useful for a certain egg-like someone on the team. When you're done, head on through the pillars to the tower. Battle 22 begins here on the outside of the tower. Fiale shows up and says we got here quicker than he expected and will kill us and blah blah blah. Dantares says, "No, we're gonna kill you, man." Then the battle proper starts. This one has our force winding its way up multiple floors of stairs on pretty thin ground, usually only 1 or 2 tiles wide for most of the map. Just be sure not to leave your weaker characters like magic users exposed. The enemies here are pretty tough. The one major thing here is the ruin. It's on the east side of the map, sort of carved into the mountain. You don't have to examine it first, you can just walk right on into it. Now, super important note here. Do not egress after the thieves have entered the ruin. If you do, they'll be gone and you won't be able to retrieve any of the items from the locked chests, and there are a few good ones in here. Make especially sure to have characters who are fairly weak attackers go into the ruin. You'll probably want 5 or 6 of them so you can block the exits, and it will require moving quickly and with purpose. Some enemies will spawn in from the holes in the ground in there too. You want to ignore them if possible and concentrate on hitting the thieves and getting the other items spread around here. I'll also add that there's a hidden character in this room, but we can come back to them after the fight, so I say don't worry about it at all right now. We'll get him when the battle is over. As we make our way up the tower, Duke Pulsus calls out that he recognizes Symbios and emerges from within. Pulsus talks about how things have been rough since the Walkyrae headed south, heralding the resurrection of Bullzone. He figures out that Conrad is dead and says he made a promise to mentor Symbios should anything happen to Conrad. Fiale tells him he won't get to keep that promise. Pulsus mocks him and surprises Fiale by knowing his name. We resume the battle, and don't worry, Pulsus won't get attacked, he just stands in his perch and watches as the battle goes on. We defeat Fiale to end the battle. Fiale is in disbelief over his loss, as so many of these enemies are when they lose. Then Basanda shows up. Pulsus demands that Dantares finish off the wounded Fiale. Dantares protests because it would be wrong to kill a defenseless enemy. Again, an odd bit of righteous morality here, considering all the people that Fiale killed, including Lord Conrad, but whatever. When Dantares finally listens to Pulsus and advances toward Fiale, Basanda casts a shock spell to push him away, and then she levitates Fiale into the air and takes him away. Pulsus says he'll explain the things that Conrad had kept secret from Symbios now. We all enter the tower. There's a huge gem in the middle and several telescopes along the outside of it. You can look through each telescope to get more information about the stretch of land you're looking at. There's also dark matter in a chest tucked away near one of the telescopes if you want it. When you're done exploring things here, talk to Pulsus to continue the story. Pulsus talks about a pact that he made with Conrad and Benetrim. All 3 of them had decided if any of them were killed before they achieved their goals of peace and equality in creating the Republic of Aspinia, they would instruct another on how to take their place. Now that Conrad is dead, that responsibility falls to his son Symbios. The team asks if the recent crises are related to the legends of the Thousand-Year Kingdom and the Vandals. Pulsus nods and tells Symbios he has to continue his father's work to ensure that the ambition of the Vandals is crushed. Pulsus says they need to attack the Bullzone sect directly, but there are issues. Mascarin asks about the Walkyrae that Pulsus mentioned earlier. He elaborates that it's an ancient flying weapon used by the Vandals long ago. Pulsus also says the current war was caused by the treachery of Bullzome's followers, and that Bullzome is even fomenting rebellion within the governments of each region. We confirm that we've seen this firsthand for Pulsus, and he observes that the Bullzome sect seems to be purposefully sowing discontent and negative energy. The giant crystal in the room has been glowing as the discord in the land has increased. Pulsus says they have to end the internal squabbling immediately, and to do that, they should go see Lord Tristus and Mallory, who happens to be Symbios' brother-in-law. So, off to Mallory it is. Well, one stop first. Leave the tower and go back down the stairs and into the ruins. In the northeast section of the ruins, walk up to the column and examine it. Turns out, it's really a secret character, the ninja Hagane. He'll join the force after we discover him. Note that Hagane can use katanas for close-range attacks and shuriken for long-range attacks. He also develops some powerful magic and gets the sleep spell and soul steal. I strongly suggest you add him to the party immediately and swap out someone else. To advance the game, leave the tower by walking off the map from the eastern side of the screen onto the Great Wall. Everyone admires the Great Wall, and Dantares notes how long and narrow it is. After Battle 23 starts, if we need to, we can egress, do any party maintenance we need to, or if we can afford it, go back and get some brand new mithril weapons. After we do all that stuff, we just come on right back. For this battle, there are stairs on the left that lead up to a chest with a sword in it. There's also dark matter and mithril hidden near the walls on this map. As you advance a bit up the wall, a cutscene begins. Another ninja, this one named Morasame, shows up and exposes the hidden boss creature here, a gigantic stone golem at the northernmost end of the map. So here's the deal with this one. The enemies are again pretty powerful, so we'll need to be careful. The stone golem has big, strong area of effect attacks, so try not to put anyone in his segment of the wall until we're fully ready to advance on him. If we've been leveling up Eldar at this point, she's probably strong enough to fly along the outside of the northern wall and pick off some of the masked Bullzone monks there. If you have a team that reaches what we'll call the Golem Corridor first, you may want to park them for a few turns until everyone else gets close enough that you can send a few people up at a time and spread them out a bit. Just be patient, take it slow, heal when you need to, and you'll make it through this one. It'll probably take a little while, but you'll get there. Morasame stays with us in this fight, but he won't join us at this time. He'll be controlled by AI for the entire battle, and sometimes he'll do some really stupid stuff, so try to heal him when he takes damage. After the golem is destroyed, Pulsus chats up Morasame, who admits that to his shame, he was captured by the Bullzone sect. They used their evil magic to make him divulge all their plans. He managed to escape somehow. He warns the Symbiose crew that he heard Bullzone cultists talking about how they have another weapon, one even more powerful than the Walkere, and that they'll soon release it on Aspinia. But he doesn't know anything else about it. Pulsis expects more problems as they head on forward. When we step off the wall, Morasame says that he can see the Bullzone sect has set a trap near here. He offers to go on and investigate. Pulsis says that Mallory is close, but they should stop at the nearby village and rest first. We go in and, hey, it's Vagabond again. Those crazy nomads picked up camp and relocated. There's some good new items to find here. This is also where I gave in and finally promoted Pen. Check out the shops and stuff, do what you need to, and head on out to advance the game. After we do that, Dontares notes that while we were taking care of business in Lookover, the Bear Soul army has advanced their position and they have no time to waste now. The battle looks like it has suspiciously few enemies in it. You'd think there should be more enemies here, and that's where you're right. Throughout this battle, poisonous stingworms spawn in. Pulsis comments on it's strange because they aren't native to this land or climate, they're tropical. Pulsis warns also that they travel in groups, so there's probably even more of them that we can't see. It's also pretty easy to get surrounded in this wide open map, so we'll want to be especially protective of our weaker characters here. Be ready with antidote spells, herbs, and fairy powders to cure anyone that gets poisoned, since poison can be really damaging in this game, as you've probably already seen. As we advance further up the map, an even bigger worm emerges to the north, flanked by regular stingworms. This is the Queen Worm, and we have to defeat her to finish this battle. Also be aware that the stingworms on her flanks will respawn. If you want them to stop spawning in, you can put characters on the spots where they normally emerge from. That will prevent it. The Queen has some especially powerful attacks, so make sure you don't put any weaker characters within her attack range. Be patient and keep at her, you'll get through this. When we defeat the Queen Worm, we have a chit-chat and express concern that we haven't seen Morasame again yet. Also says he expects something, meaning some kind of problem, is waiting for the Force in Mallory. And he's definitely right about that. Still, we have to soldier on forward, so tally-ho!
That's the end of that chapter.
We begin Chapter 6, the final chapter of Shining Force 3 Scenario 1, in the town of Mallory. Everyone's still talking about how odd it was to see the Queen Worm and Stingworms in this kind of area when they normally only live in tropical climates. Also, the team figures out that they're little more than prisoners here in Mallory, despite the fact that Symbiose's sister Margaret is the queen of the region, and his brother-in-law Tristus is the territory's lord. The castle gates are guarded, and the town gates are guarded. We can walk around town and find some items before we advance the plot, and there's also another blacksmith here, the second and final one in the entire game, so hooray for that. Make sure to get some of the good items hidden around town. The final ruin map is here, along with a ring, a staff, an axe, and some more mithril and small mithril. When we're ready to move on, we talk to the guard on the right in front of the castle gate. We answer no to the first question, that we won't wait any longer, and yes, that we do intend to rush in. At that point, Wilmer enters, and says he was just about to find us. Yeah, right. He says Lord Tristus is still busy, but he'd like us to come wait for him in the castle. At this point, most of the castle is blocked, so we can't really explore it and have no choice but to follow Wilmer. Wilmer parks us in a waiting room and tells us to stay there, but he locks the door from the outside after he leaves. Morasame emerges from the window and says things are worse here than he thought, and that Fafard's son Braff has kidnapped Tristus' son Algernon, who is also, of course, Symbiose's nephew. Duke Pulsis laments that Braff, the son of an Aspinian Republic general, could do such a thing. I guess Pulsis hasn't realized that pretty much every general of the Republic has betrayed it so far. Pulsis also decries that Braff has too much of his mother's blood in him. Morasame tells Pulsis that they should tell the story of Braff's birth. Morasame speaks of Fafard's youth. He fell madly in love with a young Bullzone priestess. Before too long, they had a child together, but after the baby was born, the priestess left him with Fafard and vanished forever. Fafard was crushed. He loved her. He raised his son Braff alone and never took a wife. Dontares said he heard that Fafard's wife had died during childbirth. Pulsis informs him that was a story that they circulated because Fafard couldn't admit they had fallen in love with the Bullzone priestess. Morasame chimes back in and says the Bullzone priestess that was involved in all of this was Basanda. Morasame says he heard the story when he was a prisoner in a town called Sorrow. Sorrow was Basanda's birthplace. With story time over, Morasame says that we're locked up here under Braff's orders. Symbiose, Dontares, and Pulsis crawl through the window to the courtyard, knowing that they'll likely have a fierce battle in which they'll be greatly outnumbered. Morasame leaves to alert and gather the rest of the Shining Force. As we enter the courtyard here, we're confronted by Wilmer and his soldiers. He says he's going to kill us, but at least he'll bury our remains with honor. What a swell guy. Pulsis tells Symbiose and Dontares to make for the center of the map and to just try to survive until the rest of the team arrives. And we aren't doing that. Also, you shouldn't do that, unless your Symbios and Dontares are particularly under-leveled at this point. I entered this battle with Symbios at level 10 and Dontares at level 9, and that's, of course, of their promoted classes. I'd say if they're both at least level 8 of their promoted class, you can carefully engage the enemies in the bottom half of the map and defeat them. So if you want to engage the enemies, personally what I do is go after the ones on the right side and move Symbios and Dontares in that direction. Be aware that the giant armors will be strong against Dontares, so you should try to weaken them with Symbios and then have Dontares finish them off. Try to keep Dontares out of their attack range too. Same for Symbios and Silver Knights, they do extra damage to him. For me, I carefully engage and wipe out all the enemies on the right, and by the time I finish that, the enemies from the left are usually within range and ready to be engaged themselves. Watch out for the Aspinia Mage on the left too, try to stay out of its magic range. After a few turns, the cavalry arrives. Murasame officially joins the force now too. Wilmer demands his forces speed up their attack while Symbios and Dontares are still split off. Little does he know that we aren't split at all. What a dummy. Okay, make sure to take out all the barrels on this map, especially the ones in the upper left corner that are blocking a door there. There are 3 treasures behind that door that we'll want to get later, and we can't do it unless we destroy the barrels now. As far as strategy from this point on, it's just a regular battle. You've seen how to deal with these enemies, and there's nothing special about this batch at all. Take your time, plan a position carefully, and take out all the enemies. Once you defeat Wilmer, he collapses and has some final dialogue, of course. He says he did everything because Aspinia is in danger and he fears for it. He also says he thinks Aspia has probably already been invaded and occupied. He says that it's Prince Arant from the Empire as well as a Bullzone force. With his final breath, he explains his true motivation. As long as Mallory remains neutral, Algernon will stay safe. And then he gasps out that Symbios shouldn't rely on Lord Tristis. Symbios' team pieces together that Wilmer locked up Lord Tristis to make it appear that it was Wilmer that had rejected all of Braff's demands. Wilmer did it to try and keep Symbios' nephew Algernon from being harmed. Pulsus chimes in that they should go defeat Braff, who was guarding the entrance to Aspia before releasing Tristis and Symbios' sister Margaret. Pulsus fears that Wilmer was right and that Tristis would send his army out against Braff, thus endangering Algernon's life. Time to head back towards Aspia. We're free to explore the castle now, and there are quite a few hidden items to get here. Start by entering the room in the northwest of the courtyard where the barrels were blocking the door during the battle. You'll find the Macho Mace, the Gungnir Lance, and some dark matter. You'll find another gloved weapon in the storage room in the main castle. There's also a potion, some mithril, and a lucky cookie. If you talk to people here and read all the books on the shelves, you'll learn that there are secret passages underneath Aspia. Gee, I wonder if that might come in handy soon. Exit the castle like so, to begin the next battle. As soon as we're outside, we see Braff and his force here. Morasame says they shouldn't take Braff lightly. Pulsus agrees. Somehow apparently using his super secret mind-reading abilities that aren't documented anywhere, Braff knows that you know the story of his birth. And I'm just being silly here, I know that's not the deal. Anyway, Braff says his mother Basanda had high praise for Symbios. Pulsus chimes in to tell Braff that Symbios didn't kill his father Pfeffer, that it was Fiale that did that. Braff says he'd wish he'd learned that earlier. Braff also says that Basanda still loved Pfefford and will probably kill Fiale herself for that. Marasame asks if the battle can be avoided. Braff says nope, he wants to test his skill against Symbios, so he's cool with wasting all the lives of his soldiers to do that. Braff orders his army to advance. Pulsus warns us this battle will be brutal, and he ain't wrong. And so begins battle number 26. Hoo boy, there sure are a lot of really strong enemies here. There's a few sections of woods and rough terrain, but the map is predominantly wide open. You really got to be careful with this one if you want to win. Now, I was kinda dumb and brought along some of my weaker characters because I wanted to level them up a bit, but you really want to enter this battle with your strongest characters. The enemies here are really tough, and some of them have spells or special attacks that can wipe out a character in a single hit. I strongly suggest keeping the party pretty close together and traveling up just one side of the map, either west along the hills and woods or right along the river. I chose to go west. To win, you only have to kill Braff, so you don't have to take out all these enemies. But again, what fun is that? I work on taking out every single enemy, for fun and profit. I save Braff for last. There's not a whole lot more I can say about strategy here, but you really need to be on point if you want most of your force to survive. Show good fundamentals, as they say. It's not the best fight to egress from and do over, since the enemies are very far away from the start, and it takes a while to engage them. But hey, if you don't mind that, you can go ahead and leave and come back a few times if you want. Anyway, we defeat Braff in battle, and he laments his loss. A lot of lamenting going on. He tells us that he didn't kidnap Algernon, but he knows that he's okay. He says it was Prince Orant of the Destonian Empire that did it, specifically to keep Tristis and Mallory from getting involved in the conflict. Just then, as Braff prepares himself to die, Basanda shows up. She says she won't let him die. She sends a dragon down to pick up Braff and carry him away. Basanda taunts us and says that even though we defeated Braff, we couldn't gain entrance to Aspia and will never be able to defeat the giant Imperial army there. She gives us a helpful hint about a statue and a gem before piecing out. Gee, thanks, mortal enemy whose son I just about murdered. Before you move a muscle, stop. Pick up the glowing statue gem on the ground right near Symbios. Make sure you give it to someone who you intend to bring into the next battle. I suggest going back to Mallory and doing whatever party maintenance you need to, and then coming back here. If you do decide to swap out some party members, make absolutely sure that somebody in the active party has the statue gem when you get back here. Now to continue from this point on, we have to approach the large statue near the gate, open the menu, and use the statue gem from the item menu. This takes us into the catacombs that we heard so much about in Mallory. There's a sealed door near the entrance, and you can't enter it. Ever. Seriously, not in this game. So proceed down the very long hallway, and as soon as you emerge, a cutscene begins. Our happy clappy time in finding the secret underground entrance is ruined by Basanda. She's further in the catacombs next to General Spiriel from the Destonian Empire. Basanda goes on and rants about how her magic is so powerful it can even bring people back from the dead. Basanda also says that if the Aspidian Republic had allied with Bolzome, then Aspia would be spared its impending destruction. Dantares basically says Aspia will be destroyed over his dead body, and Basanda's like, hey, sure, okay, the Titan is already demolishing the place right now. Yes, the Titan of Aspia, the Titan Warrior, the giant thing that we learned about was being excavated earlier in the game, has been completely dug out and activated. Basanda is controlling it with the Negate Cane. The Titan was the guardian of the Vandal Kingdom 1,000 years ago, and has been dormant for who knows how long at this point. Pulsa says they have to engage Basanda and get that Negate Staff so they can control the Titan and stop it. Thus begins Battle 27. First up, fair warning, there are only 2 required battles left. There is a third optional one available right after this one too. To begin with this map, there's a ruin with a few entrances on the map here. The thief will enter it as quickly as they can reach it. The other entrance is on the bottom right corner of the map, basically southeast. Go ahead and rotate the camera if you don't see it. Get 4 or 6 of your force members into there, and remember, do not egress or use an angel wing after the thief enters the ruin. If you want the treasures from inside there, you're going to have to be in this for the long haul. And I would say at minimum, you probably want the Mitra Ankh that you can get in there. Just be careful not to kill the thief while getting it. Also for this ruin, there are a few single tile wide choke points that can really slow you down and make getting the stuff impossible. Try to position characters so they can get all the way through the choke point in one turn so that an enemy doesn't block it and cut you off from the thieves. Have someone with area of effect magic clear out some of the barrels in the southeastern section to help speed things up too. It can be kind of tough to catch the thief here, so you really have to be on point and move as fast as you can. As for the main battle itself, it's mostly similar to prior ones with enemies like Cerberus again. Cerberi, whatever. There are harpies here, masked mages, and a few others too. Watch out for the minotaurs though. They hit very hard and have a lot of hit points. In general, you have to snake your way around the narrow ground and bridges here. The elevated enemies can rush at you from above, but you can't walk up those elevations. You have to take stairs. Be super careful to try and keep your characters in position at the bottom row of tiles in any section here. Sneak up with distance attackers like Hayward, Justin, or Hagane, if they're not in the ruin, and blast enemies from 3 squares away to weaken them before they come down. The mages here will use AoE attacks, so you'll probably want to send a strong character up first to lure them into range before battering them with everything you've got. And next up, before you get too far, do not, I repeat, do not kill Spiriel. If you finish this battle with her alive, she will be able to join the group in Scenario 3. If you kill her here, you will lose her as a party member in that scenario. Now Spiriel has some nasty attacks. The best thing I can advise here is to do one of 2 things, or maybe both. Use sleep spells to put her to sleep. It usually lasts for a few turns, and she can't take any action during that time. Otherwise, you might want to enclose her by completely surrounding her with some of your stronger characters and keeping a healer nearby ready to fix your teammates' HP if they get hit hard by Spiriel. It can be rough going, but hey, you got this. When you get near Basanda on the north side of the map, you'll see she's got a ton of HP and really powerful magic attacks. Many characters can die in one hit. I suggest approaching her with 1 character at a time, doing some damage, having them retreat, move someone else in while you heal the other character, rinse and repeat. You can sneak Eldar up towards the Minotaurs here and start attacking them, but Eldar can only take a couple of hits from them, even at a pretty high level. Plus the computer may decide to have Basanda attack her during any of her turns. So it's risky, but you can make it work if you're really careful. If you really want to lure Basanda out, which I don't recommend, put Symbios just out of her current attack range, and she'll usually take a step or two closer to her. Keep at it until Basanda is defeated, and don't worry, you'll probably have some Force members die in this fight. That's just how it goes. Basanda, just like every other bad guy in this game, is shocked that we were able to defeat her. She theorizes that we were able to pull it off since we were a team of people with our hearts together in one purpose. Something unthinkable for the Bullzome sect. Morasame tries to grab the negate cane and destroy it, but it whirls him away. Basanda says that she didn't do that, it was the dark power in the cane itself, and that it can only be wielded by someone just as dark as it is. Basanda gets up, sways, and babbles about being the only hope we have to destroy the cane, and that the Titan of Aspio will be uncontrollable without it. Basanda adds that even the Imperial armies fighting along with the Bullzome sect won't be safe once the cane is gone. In a final act of defiance, Basanda jumps and floats for a moment with the last of her strength to tell us she doesn't care about us at all, and that Bullzome will be revived. She cackles as she plunges into the murky depths below. Pulsa stops everyone from going after her, since no one would be able to touch the cane anyway, even if they were able to reach it in the deep, deep waters below. He then says that they have to defeat the Titan. Since we finish this fight with Spirial alive, she'll snap out of it and realize that she's been lied to for a long time, having been told that the Republic had betrayed the Empire, but now she realizes that wasn't true. If you talk to her again, she says she refuses to help the Empire of Destonia anymore, but also that she doesn't trust the Republic of Aspinia. She wonders what to do, but she won't do anything else in this scenario, so we're done here. We're now free to wander around again. We can either do the next cutscene and move the plot forward, or we can go do the game's lone optional battle, the Ancient Hall of Shrines. It's just to the right of where Basanda had been stationed on the battle map. There's a doorway with no door. Are we going to leave an optional battle undone? Of course not. So let's go ahead and do this now. I'll explain everything in just a moment about what the deal is with this special map. If we need to revive anyone or replenish any items, we can head on back to Mallory. Unfortunately, we can't just egress out of this next battle to go back there faster. Instead, egressing puts us right outside the doorway. Now, if you're playing along here, I do suggest going back, doing all that stuff, all your party maintenance, changing party members, bringing in the weakest party members, while keeping some powerful ones with you. Optimally, you kind of want a 50-50 split between weak and strong characters. So I will go over this battle now, and you might be wondering why even do this battle, because the final battle in the game requires that you use every character in your party, as I mentioned earlier. And having even just one weak link can mean that you'll be doing a part of that last battle that takes a long time over and over. So save yourself that hassle. Just do some easy leveling up here instead. Alright, here's battle number 28, our optional battle. After this battle begins, you'll see it's unlike any other battle in the game. In fact, it's not one battle, it's 4 battles. There are 4 distinct battlefields here that we have to complete one at a time. The first 3 are loaded with respawning enemies that give you way more experience than normal, so they're ideal to use as fodder to get your weaker members leveled up. I'll also mention that the 4th battle here features by far the hardest boss in the entire game, and it almost definitely will kill most of your force no matter how well prepared you are. Remember, it's okay to egress and come back, especially if you want to really concentrate on leveling a few specific characters. By the end of this fight, you want most of your force to be at roughly level 15 or more. I would say the minimum threshold that you should be looking for any character in a promoted class, I would say minimum level 8. If you don't do at least that, you're going to have a bad time in the next battle. Alright, so let's do this already. Part 1 here, this first phase, you don't need to employ much strategy. Just have your weak characters whacking skeletons for experience for as long as you want. Higher level characters, in this case we'll take that to mean level 11 and up, will only get about 1 experience point, but everybody else will get a lot more. Once you're done murdering or respawning skeletons, take out the succubus in the middle of the map to end the slaughter. The second battle here works in the exact same way. It ends whenever you kill the harpy in the center at the top of the pyramid-like structure. When you're ready, just have Eldar fly up there and kill it. However, you'll want to linger around here and kill respawning enemies for a while. The Hydras in particular are great for getting characters up to level 15. You'll want to really take advantage of this, it'll save you some frustration later. Characters can get negative status effects here, but don't worry, they go away when the battle ends. So when you've had enough, kill the Harpy, and then you can go on to Phase 3. The third phase of the battle features tougher enemies. You can also search some of the columns here to pick up a few hidden items. This battle will end when you take out the Giga Breaker at the top center. By now, your higher level characters probably aren't getting much experience anymore, so try to give kills to the weaker characters. Once you've had enough here, kill the Giga Breaker and we move on. Phase 4. By the holy hand grenade of Antioch, this 4th and final area is insane. If you love watching your characters die, this is the battle for you. There's a blue dragon, 2 high wizards, and the boss, the Skull Mage, who has about 1,000 hit points. No joke. There's also a chest behind them, but you can't open it during the battle. It's the reward you get for finishing this battle, and you'll get it automatically if you are able to win. The Skull Mage in particular is immune to sleep and instant death attacks, and it can just do the Tiamat summon on every single single turn. He also recovers 15 MP on every turn. I strongly suggest taking out all the other enemies first so you can then concentrate on the Skull Mage. I wish I had a brilliant strategy to give you here, but there's really only two things I can suggest, and neither of them's great. The first is the one-at-a-time approach. You want to try to position a few characters around the Skull Mage, but keep them far enough away from each other that they won't be part of the same area of effect magic spell. If you go this route, we'll call this the Battle of Attrition method. Each character will die every time that Tiamat gets cast, if it only hits them. Still, it is possible to win this way, and this is the actual method that I use in this video. The other method is to have characters stay next to each other in range near him. Why would you do this seemingly suicidal thing? You do it because the damage from summon spells like Tiamat is spread out among all of its targets. So if he's hitting, say, 3 or more characters at a time, the damage to each character is greatly reduced. If you're going to do this method, you'll need your healers to be with you alive and have plenty of MP, and everyone should carry some healing items. You can win this way, but it's tough. It also makes the fight longer, since you gotta watch multiple characters getting hit on every single move. No matter which route you go, stick with it. If you're lucky enough to defeat him, you'll get the Justice Sword as a drop. When the victory cutscene starts, Symbios will talk to Pulses for a moment, and then open the chest and take the Crystal Rod. For the love of all that is holy, go and save your game right now. Alright, so at this point, we want to set up our party with everyone that we want in our main force in the final battle back in town. We want to have a strong character or two with at least one healer in the B team in reserve. We go back to the catacombs, and this time we go west. We'll eventually encounter a few guards from Aspia here, and they'll tell us about the giant and that it seems to have gone crazy and is attacking everyone, including the Imperial forces. Pulsus decides that we can use the giant's madness to our advantage, and that we can use it to deal with our enemies. When the conversation is done, we head down the stairs, and just before we leave to go to the final area, Finding, a birdman, flies in. Up until this point, Finding has been in the prison in Mallory, so it's possible if you're playing along that you've already seen him down there. Finding tells us that Tristus has been freed in Mallory and knows that Wilmer was defeated. Tristus has already decided to attack the Empire in Aspia, which will put Algernon's life at risk. Finding tells us we should go back and speak to Tristus and convince him not to attack yet. We agree to talk to Tristus, and Finding flies ahead to tell him that we're coming and not to do anything yet. So, back to Mallory it is, yet again. Come on, game, could you have just faded out and put us there? Yeesh. When we arrive at Mallory, we arrive in the regular town again, no longer the castle. So, yay for that at least. Go to the item shop. It's still not open, but talk to the woman there, and she'll give you a healing rain, which can definitely come in handy in the next and final battle. The weapon shop is open now, and you can always head back to the blacksmith if you want to use any mithril or dark matter you've got left. Also, you may want to consider putting some of your mithril or things you might want to carry over to other chapters into the active inventory of the party members as you take them with you into the final battle. When we're done with all our business there, we head back to the castle to talk to Lord Tristus and his wife Margaret, who, as I mentioned earlier, is Symbios' sister. She is really happy to see that Symbios is alive and well. She says she worries about him and all the danger that he seems to find himself in. She's also glad that he wants to rescue Algernon, but she's terrified that Symbios will get killed just like their father Conrad did back in Flagger. Tristus says that Conrad was not the kind of man to take uncalculated risks. He also doesn't want to see his beloved wife lose her brother right after losing her father. The group discusses the dire situation of the Destonian troops occupying the inside of the castle and holding the outside as well, with the Titan also patrolling the moat. Pulsus discusses his plan to use the Titan to attack the Imperials and also to use water to defeat the Titan. He plans to send a second team to open the dam quickly, causing a rush of water and the Titan to be destroyed in it. Tristus agrees it sounds like a good plan, and then Finding joins us for the final battle. Here we can mop up anything we want to do because this is it, folks. We'll be entering the final battle at the end of the game next. Make sure that your B team is pretty good and in good shape. If not, you can always head back and redo the optional battle. Oh, and if you missed any of the secret characters and your roster is a bit lacking, you can hire the mercenaries in the bar for the final battle too. Alright, here we are in battle number 29, the final battle of Shining Force 3, Scenario 1. It can be devastating, or pretty easy depending on the strength of your characters and knowing things in advance that you couldn't possibly know going in, but that I'll tell you right now. In fact, I already started telling you by how to divide up your party. That's step 1. Your A team will be on the bridge that leads into Aspia Castle over the moat. The enemies here are strong, but if your characters are high level, say 13 to 15 or more, they will not be too much of a big deal. Just start taking everything out using the techniques that you've been employing the whole game. Oh, and we'll also see Algernon dangling from a rope in the northeast corner of the map for the entire battle. Hi Algernon! The B team, meanwhile, has another goal. They have to get to the wheel in the upper left corner here and turn it to open the dam. jam. With strong characters and a healer present, this is pretty easy. If you forgot to set up the B team that way, just aggress on Symbiosis next turn and make sure that you do it, because this will be tough to impossible if you're loaded with weak characters. There are no special strategies to recommend. You'll know these enemy types by now and how to deal with them. Now I forgot to send a healer here, but I knew I had enough healing items with me that I'd be able to finish the area off. Now what I will say is do not finish off the boss here, the Giga Breaker, right away. It'll be a while before we get there, but let's go back to the bridge and I'll explain. If you're playing yourself, listen carefully. Okay, on the bridge, a while after the fight starts, the Titan emerges from the moat. One note here, in the Japanese release, the Titan can actually be destroyed. It has a ton of hit points and you have to use the Elbasem orb on it. In the US version, it cannot be killed. For this translated version, which is sort of an amalgam of the original US release and some other stuff that they added, I'm not sure if you can destroy it or not. If somebody knows for sure, feel free to comment below. So anyway, I suggest taking out all the enemies on both sides of the bridge. Occupy the spaces on the far western side of the bridge where enemies spawn to limit how many can come after you. When the Titan comes out, he will start attacking you. He has a summon type attack and a few large area of effect attacks. What you want to do is wait until the B team has the Giga Breaker almost killed. When they have it down to say its last turn, you want to make sure they don't kill it yet. Instead, start moving all of your characters to the north side of the bridge near the castle. This is essential. They will die if they are not there, and if you lose Symbios, it's game over as usual, and you'll need to start over from the beginning of the battle. You'll need to move all your characters so they're in between the taller walls in front of the drawbridge right by the castle gate. I also suggest you try to group characters 2 or 3 together close by and make sure you have several in the same, horizontal or vertical area, because the Titan will use its summon class attack, which will kill an individual if it only hits one person. Once everyone is safe, or one turn before everyone is safe, if you want to be especially risky but efficient, have the B team kill the Giga Breaker. The B team will say that usually you'd spin the wheel slowly, but since we want the water to go rushing in, we need to spin it quickly to cause that effect. Once that's done, we have until the end of this turn, to get everyone between those walls. We hear the flare Finding fired, and Orant suddenly reacts and asks what's going on. Pulsis says it sounds like Finding succeeded and tells us to head for the walls. Oh, and heal anyone that you need to, because the Titan will get one last shot in. Anyway, at the end of the Titan's turn, the water starts to rush in very quickly. Any character, friend or foe, not in between those walls when this happens, will be swept away and instantly die. And you don't want to lose anyone here, because there's still one more phase to this battle left. Once the flood is over, the next and final phase of the battle begins. With the quick rushing water in the moat, Orant is aghast and wonders just what happened and how the Titan could have been destroyed. We tell Orant to surrender. He says, hell no, he's still got his strongest soldiers with him right now. He says once he gets us out of the way, he'll usurp his father Domaric's throne and kill anyone that opposes his rule. With that, the battle itself begins. Watch out for respawning blue dragons, and you'll want to use a combination of distance attacks, magic users, and Eldar to take out the enemies that surround Orant. For Orant himself, position a few characters in attack range, but at least 3 squares away from each other. Hayward and Hagane are pretty ideal for this, as long as you gave Hagane his Mithril Shuriken. You'll have to work on Orant for quite a while. Make sure he doesn't kill Symbios, or you'll have to do this very long battle over again from the beginning. I still remember the first time I played this on my Saturn. I died in the water rush. Symbios got swept away and I was so mad. Then I died on my second try because I didn't have enough people left after the water rush. Spots I thought were safe weren't. So listen to my advice here. It comes from real life experience. So we want to make sure that we are healing characters when necessary. If we have a Light of Hope item with us, we can use that to recover everyone's magic points to full when we have enough people that get low on MP. Same for healing rain. If we need to use that, we can use it if we haven't already. That will heal everyone to full. I move in for the kill with Symbios here, and Orant is gone, and that's it! We've beaten the game, finally! Hooray! Orant acknowledges his defeat, saying he fell into our trap. He wonders why his reinforcements never arrived. He calls Symbios brilliant. Pulsis asks him why he allied himself with the Bullzome sect. Orant tells him that as a second son, he could have never been emperor. He had to claim rule for himself by showing how powerful he was. He would have blamed the Bullzome cult for all the shenanigans that led up to this point, and then claimed the throne. So the entire game essentially happens because Orant wanted to break the line of succession. Or did it? More on that shortly. Everyone remembers that Algernon is still just dangling there. Lord Tristus and Lady Margaret arrive. It seems Tristus secretly and slowly put his people into place and then engaged in a surprise attack on the Destonian troops on the other side of the moat, which explains why Orant's reinforcements never arrived. Tristis executed the attack right after Finding opened the dam, and then suddenly an evil ninja named Yasha shows up. He's a Destonian under the orders of Emperor Domaric, who had been keeping an eye on Arant for him. Yasha says that the succession didn't really have anything to do with anything, and that Domaric had always planned to reclaim the Aspinian Republic, which used to be a part of the Empire. Domaric wanted it for himself, and that a huge invasion force from the Empire is already on the way to claim it. Yasha then says normally he wouldn't kill a child, but he needs to make an example here, because Tristis violated some kind of agreement about attacking Aspia. Tristis and Margaret beg Yasha not to do it, but then that motherfucker Yasha cuts the rope, dropping poor defenseless Algernon into the rushing moat below. Symbios prepares to jump into the rushing water to go after him, even though it will almost certainly mean his own death. Pulsus tells him not to do it, but Symbios has apparently had enough of letting people die in waters, and hops on the railing getting ready to jump when he's instantly stopped by Finding, who shows up holding Algernon and flies him safely onto the bridge, where his parents Tristis and Margaret are finally reunited with him, and he leaps into their arms. And that's the end of the game proper. And now we have the ending scenes to talk about, which are quick. We're almost there, folks. First we get a rather long credit roll, but you know there's more, so stick around for it. I don't remember if you can skip this or not, I didn't even try. Just enjoy the music and all the fancy battle scenes it shows. Once the credits are over, we see a view of Aspia. The camera pans down and we're on top of a castle. Benetrim, Pulsus, Tristis, Symbios, and Dantares are here. Benetrim laments how the rampaging titan damaged so much of the city. Pulsus says that it'll take time to rebuild, but Lookover will continue to provide aid. Benetrim notes that they can repair the buildings, but not all the lives that were lost during the war. Humble Symbios doesn't want to admit the huge role he played in the victories here, but everyone gives him all the credit. The group wonders about the coming Imperial invasion force. Tristis says, hey guys, don't worry. Since ancient times, no force has ever breached the inner wall. And the inner wall is the whole reason they were able to gain independence from the Empire in the first place. Maybe I'm missing something here. But Arant's force was inside the castle. Oh well, anyway, they all wonder what the Destonian Empire and Domaric are planning. Benetrim worries that they might find the secret passage, and also worries about Tybalt's army, who should be out there watching the wall right now. Suddenly, there's a loud rumble. Finding arrives in a panic. He says that Tybalt's army has been completely annihilated, and that the Empire has breached the inner wall. Benetrim says to himself there should be no bloodshed between Aspinia and Destonia right now. They need to unite against their common enemy, the Vandals. Everyone rushes to the bridge yet again. The Force is surprised to see that Median is here and taking point. Median says he's saddened that they had to meet again this way. Median says fate brought him here. Dantares yells at him and tells him no, he's here because he invaded Aspia. Dantares sort of has a point there. Then we hear a laugh and we pan back to the gate. It's Emperor Domaric. He's giddy after realizing his goal, reclaiming the land that split from the Empire 20 years ago and became the Republic of Aspinia. He said this land was stolen by Conrad. Benetrim realizes Domaric was the one now behind everything. He engineered his own kidnapping and put all the events of the story into motion. Campbell is eager to engage Dantares in battle. Median tells him to calm down and wait until they're on the battlefield. There's no need to rush things. The Aspinians ask if anything can be done to avoid this conflict. Median says no, not now that they've killed Prince Arant in battle. Domaric commands Median to kill Conrad's son, Symbios. We get a little ending text that says a battle between Symbios and Median seems inevitable, and that cliffhanger ends the first scenario of Shining Force 3. I will note that it's slightly different if you're playing the US version, rather than the sort of semi-translated version here. Last thing, make sure you do a completion save. You'll need that if you want to carry everything over to scenarios 2 and 3, which we do, so completion save done. Okay folks, that's the in-depth story of Shining Force 3 Scenario 1. What's left to do in this video? Review the game, of course, which I will keep really brief. Shining Force 3 Scenario 1, known simply as Shining Force 3 here in the US, is a game that when I first played it, I was not the biggest fan of. It felt like something was just kind of off about it. The move to 3D graphics was a little jarring, especially with the CGI sprites that are used during the battles and exploration areas. I was also a little disappointed that the game didn't use Red Book audio or even Yellow Book audio. Like many other people, I was also mad that we never got Scenarios 2 and 3 in English at the time. We were starved for Saturn games in the US back then. This was between the time that Sega announced the death of the Saturn and the coming of the Dreamcast, basically. I still like the game even then, though. But I have to say, I feel like this game has only gotten better with age, and I appreciate it a lot more now than I did when I was younger. The gameplay is absolutely as compelling as it ever was. At times it's far more strategic than any prior game in the series, and many maps have a lot more moving parts and things to consider than the other games before it. The added complexity to the gameplay, including a new friendship system, really gives Shining Force 3 Scenario 1 something extra. The fair amount of hidden things makes it worth coming back to also. And the story in this game, as you've seen, is way more mature and complex than in any of the other Shining Force titles. On one layer, there's a lot of political intrigue, even though it's not giving the chance to truly develop as it might in something like a novel, a TV show, or even a movie. On the other hand, it does still add a layer of depth and grounding that's missing from the earlier titles in the series. On another layer, we have the overarching plot, which I won't really discuss in this video because we still have 2 more games to get through, so I'll talk about that in the other scenarios when we've seen more of the game. But that greater plot is also sort of like a container that all the events of the Shining Force 3 titles and also Shining the Holy Ark take place within. It's woven together pretty impressively in the end, although not perfectly. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Now visually, Shining Force 3 Scenario 1 is okay. It's not the best looking RPG of its era, but the polygonal backgrounds for the maps are pretty nice, and the CGI characters are better than the prior 2 Shining games on Saturn. The polygonal characters and foregrounds in the battle scenes are a bit rough even for the time, but a lot of the spell and special attack effects are pretty impressive even today. Overall, there's definitely more good than bad here, but I'd say it's just about average considering what Saturn and PlayStation games looked like when Scenario 1 came out. So the music in Shining Force 3 Scenario 1 is not CD quality and doesn't match the brilliant classical sound of Shining Force CD on Sega CD, but it is still generally fantastic and very well composed as usual for the series. As I mentioned earlier, I'd often find myself humming along with it, and some of the tracks are truly inspired. Many repeat in future scenarios, but there are some new songs to appear later in other scenarios too. Are there any downsides to this game? Well, yeah, there are a few. First, some of the battles are needlessly complicated. Saving the refugees in that train battle will haunt you to your dying days if you try doing it without this video or some other kind of guide to help you. You'll just die over and over or have them die over and over. And it's annoying just how much stuff is missable. I do wish we could travel more freely like we could in Shining Force 2. Instead, we're back to the basic structure of the original Shining Force on Genesis. Now, I know this is all done in service of the story, I just wish the game had a little more freedom. Some more optional stuff to do would have been nice, especially optional battles could have spiced things up a bit. Finally, some of the story threads aren't too well developed because they're spread out to other scenarios. Having Arant as the final villain here, I mean, while we hear about him from time to time, we really never see him except at the beginning of the game and the very end, and that just doesn't feel right. The whole kidnapping plot of the Emperor is resolved basically off-screen in this game. He's just back leading his forces at the end. They kind of explained what happened, but it would have made a lot more sense to have that unfold as part of this game's story. And there are a few other things like that too, but I'm not going to mention them all. Sure, there are some payoffs for this stuff in Scenarios 2 and 3, but still Scenario 1's cohesion is hurt a bit by a lack of character development and some disjointed plot elements. In the end, Shining Force 3 Scenario 1 is a great strategy RPG for the Saturn that does the legacy of the series proud. It's not exactly perfect, and some sections will have you tearing your hair out, but it's so good that it's still worth the occasional frustration. I'm giving Shining Force 3 Scenario 1 a 9 out of 10. Now, I'm not going to do a complete story analysis here in this episode, because I'm going to save that until we're done with Scenario 3. After that, we can talk about the whole game's story. Alrighty, so the next episode of this series will cover, surprise surprise, Shining Force 3 Scenario 2. And it's probably not going to be out for about at least 2 months. As I said, it takes a long time to make these. So tell me about your Shining Force 3 Scenario 1 experience. Do you own the US Saturn version like I do? Had you played it to death back in the day? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Did you discover this just recently and play it through emulation? I'd love to hear all about it in the comments. And that'll do it for this video, my retro gaming friends. If you enjoyed it, please like it and share it online somewhere. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you'll never miss any of my videos. If you want to help support the work that I do here, you can do that via Patreon or Ko-fi or here on YouTube through channel memberships. With that, I'll say thanks for watching and see me later.